LoveLore Library. Chapter 80. Old Madam was frightened and took a step back in a trance. She accidentally stepped on the pedal and fell on the Arhat bed. Old Madam. Mammy Chin hurriedly supported her. Chin Ening also subconsciously supported her. If one looked carefully at her expression, they would find that she was absent-minded at this time. Her big eyes were filled with tears of grief, and her hands were trembling. However, she held back her tears and tried her best to calm herself down. Old Madam's eyes stared blankly. After a long time, she recovered her breath and her tears flowed down. Really, it's a sin, a sin. I don't know what to say. She then asked Ji Xiang, did Chitai say if your master has any other orders? Answering Old Madam, there are no other orders. Master only said that he won't return to the manor tonight. Old Madam, please don't worry. How can I not worry? The Emperor will take someone's life if he doesn't agree with him. Old Madam patted her chest, and her tears fell like rolling beads. I shouldn't have asked Menggu to be an official. Tell me, what is this? Back then, when the plan of sowing discord came out, it indeed became famous and dealt a heavy blow to Northern Ji. However, Menggu was also hated by that evil embryo Meng Ji. Now that he has become the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, the Emperor is looking for him in all matters, both big and small. Who knows, he might even be schemed against by someone. Mammy Chin saw that Old Madam was crying sadly and hurriedly comforted her softly. However, Chin Ening maintained the posture of supporting Old Madam. Her heart was very sad. So many people from Ding General Manor had died. Even her 7- and 5-year-old little nephews were among them. However, when Old Madam heard the news, she was sad because she was afraid that her family would be implicated. This was human nature. Didn't she know it long ago? Chin Ening suppressed her sadness and quickly calculated in her heart, with Old Madam's temper, if she asked Old Madam to let the Sun clan out now and let them send off the men from Ding General Manor, Old Madam would definitely be fuming with anger and lock her up. Old Madam would rather let the corpses of Ding General Manor's people lie on the streets. Even if they smelled, she wouldn't care. Not only the Old Madam, if it was anyone else, they probably wouldn't have the guts to collect the corpse after the Emperor suddenly beheaded them in a fit of rage. However, she could not bear to see her grandfather and the others die in such a miserable state. She had to collect their corpses, and she had to do it flawlessly. After the conversation with Qin Huayuan just now, Chin Ening more or less knew what to do. She wiped away her tears and came up with a countermeasure. Just as Chin Ening was thinking about this, the sound of a woman crying suddenly came from outside. Let me go. Let me go, I want to get out, let me out. First Madam, you can't. Auntie, don't go out. It's a mess outside. Grandmother will be worried if you go like this. I won't. You bunch of people, if it wasn't your father or brother who was in trouble, you wouldn't care. Lower your voice. This is the gate of Xiai Shao Garden. My ancestors, my gods and Buddhas. I'm still afraid of being heard. That ungrateful old woman. How did she stick to me when my family was rich? Now that something has happened, she shrinks her neck. She's simply worse than a pig or a dog. The Old Madam couldn't hear the conversation outside clearly, but she could hear the few words that were scolding her very clearly. Old woman, ungrateful, worse than a pig or a dog, slap her. Slap her. The Old Madam's face turned purple, and she stood up abruptly. Is this the family upbringing of that stupid woman? How is it that her upbringing is completely gone after her father died? She dared to insult her mother-in-law like this, where is the slightest bit of filial piety left? I'm going to divorce him. I'm going to open the ancestral hall and divorce this unfilial and stupid woman for Menggu. Qin Yining supported the old madam's arm at the side, but the gaze that he looked at her with gradually turned cold. Even if it was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, the old madam's way of doing things was too unsightly. It was enough to see that the old madam wasn't just snobbish, she was selfish to the point of being cold-blooded. Mammy Qin was on the other side of the old madam, and she was also cursing in her heart. However, as a servant, she couldn't say much. She inadvertently met Qin Yining's gaze, and Mammy Qin felt a chill on her back. She felt that the person she was facing wasn't the fourth miss, but Qin Huayuan. She couldn't help but persuade, "Old madam, please calm down. First madam's maternal family was ruined, so it's normal for her to be so sad. Her mind must be muddled at this moment, and she's talking nonsense. Why should old madam bother with a crazy person? Moreover, you have to ask for first master's opinion before divorcing him. Moreover, you also have to take into account first master's reputation outside." Qin Yining didn't want to continue listening to the old madam. She had already seen through her realistic and powerful grandmother. She even thought that if her mother was divorced now, it would be a good thing. She had thousands of ways to let her mother live happily outside. Duke Ding had only fallen for a day, and the attitude of everyone in Prime Minister's Fu was already like this. How much more would her mother have to suffer if she stayed? She wasn't a person who could swallow her anger and scheme. She would be eaten until there wasn't any residue left. Even if her father wanted to intervene, he was still a filial son. Qin Yining curtsied to the old madam and said, "Grandmother, I'll go out and take a look." Without waiting for the old madam to speak, she quickly walked out. The old madam was helped to sit down by Mammy Qin. She gasped for breath and stomped her feet. "Look, the sky has been turned upside down." Qin Yining walked out of Xiaishao Garden's courtyard and saw Mother Jean and Bing Tang, one on the left and one on the right, persuading the Sun Clan, who was covering their faces and crying. In addition, there was a maidservant and an older female servant kneeling on the ground and hugging the Sun Clan's two legs. The maidservant was called Chui Fu, and the older female servant was surnamed Zhang. One was the sixth young Miss personal maidservant, and the other was the sixth young Miss wet nurse. As for the sixth young Miss, she was standing not far away and was whispering to the other servants who were watching the show. Qin Yining had learned to be smart. He knew that he wouldn't show himself and instead found a spear. Qin Yining quickly stepped forward and casually lifted the two people hugging the Sun Clan's two legs by their collars and threw them away. "Who do you think you are? You dare to touch the first madam? Even if Duke Ding's Fu has fallen, the first madam is still my father's first wife. What do you want to do? Do you want to die?" Chui Fu and Nanny Zhang fell to the ground. It didn't hurt, but they were so scared that their faces turned pale. The sixth young miss couldn't keep her cool and immediately rushed over. It was eldest aunt who didn't listen to persuasion and insisted on going out. That was why Chui Fu and Nanny Zhang stopped her. Eldest aunt didn't report to old madam and rushed out of the ancestral hall on her own accord. What happened? Qin Yining ignored the sixth young miss and turned to ask Mother Jean. At this time, the Sun Clan had already cried and hugged Qin Yining. She sobbed unclearly and aggrievedly smeared her tears on Qin Yining's shoulder. She muttered, "I want to go out, Sister Yi. I want to go out and see your maternal grandfather." Mother Jean whispered, "Fourth young miss, just now, the sixth young miss came to tell Madam that Duke Ding and the others were beheaded. Madam was in a hurry to go out. We couldn't stop her no matter what. Please persuade Madam." Qin Yining hugged the Sun Clan and cast a sidelong glance at the sixth young miss. "You actually listened to Qin Huining's words. How many bones did she give you?" The sixth young miss didn't immediately react. She blinked and angrily said, "Who are you calling a dog? Calling you a dog is an insult to dogs. For the sake of second aunt, I won't touch you. However, your actions won't allow you to be on a high pedestal. Bing Tang, immediately go to see second aunt and tell her that Qin Shuangning secretly went to the ancestral hall to incite my mother. She also ordered the maidservant and wet nurse to detain my mother here and provoked my mother to shout. You have no proof. Call 2 eloquent witnesses. Yes. Bing Tang nodded. The 6th young miss screamed, Qin Yining, you and I are both young misses of the family Qin. You can bully your adopted daughter, but can you bully your biological daughter like me? You dare to sow discord in front of second madam. Qin Yining ignored him and glanced at the old maids who were watching around. He immediately saw 3rd shopkeeper Jing's mother, Mother Jing, pull out a sturdy woman. 4th young miss, this servant is willing to be a witness. Qin Yining nodded. Okay, thank you. He didn't call her Mother Jing, but pretended not to know her. Nanny Jing pulled the sturdy old woman and followed Bing Tang to the 2nd branch in quick steps. The 6th young miss was completely flustered. She wasn't raised under D Mother's name. How could D Mother let her go after making such a scene? What are you waiting for? Stop them. The 6th young miss screamed and pulled Shui Fu and Mother Zhang to stop them. The 2 obeyed and chased after them. However, they were knocked down by Mother Jing and the sturdy woman. Qin Yining took advantage of the chaos and whispered a few words in the Sun clan's ear. The Sun clan was stunned at first. Then, her eyes rolled back and she fainted. Mother! Mother! Someone come! Call a doctor. Madam must have fainted from grief. Someone come. Mother Jean heard Qin Yining's words and rushed into Ci Shao Garden to ask for help. Old Madam was wearing a cloak and had been helped out by Mammy Qin, Ji Xiang, and Ru Yi. She stood on the steps and stared at the Sun clan with a frown. Qin Yining had already helped the Sun clan to sit on the ground. Helpless tears streamed down his face. He called out like a kitten, Mother, don't scare me. Please wake up. Old Madam opened her mouth, but Mammy Qin secretly pinched her arm. She looked at Mammy Qin unwillingly. Mammy Qin persuaded her in a low voice, Eldest Master is still in the palace. You have to consider his thoughts. Moreover, there are so many people watching. Old Madam glanced at the surrounding servants and suppressed her anger. She swallowed back the words immediately divorce this idiot and throw her out. After all, she still cherished her reputation. Moreover, seeing her daughter-in-law, who had an accident, fainted in front of her, how could she not take her in? Carry her into Ci Shao Garden and wait for the doctor. Old Madam ordered. Mammy Qin immediately called for people to bring a spring stool and carefully moved the Sun clan onto it. The group of people stumbled into the house. Qin Yining took advantage of the chaos and quickly ran in the direction of the 2nd branch. He bumped into Bing Tang, Mother Jing, and the sturdy woman who had just come out. 4th Miss. Mother Jing, immediately think of a way to go out and help me pass a message to Master Zhong. Thank you very much. I don't dare. Miss, please instruct me. Qin Yining whispered into Mother Jing's ear and saw that Mother Jing understood. Then, he quickly rushed to Ci Shao Garden with Bing Tang. Chapter 81. When Qin Yining and Bing Tang stepped into Ci Shao Garden, Mammy Qin was anxiously waiting in the corridor. When she saw Qin Yining running in with Bing Tang, she hurriedly greeted them and said in a low voice, Madam Dowager is accompanying First Madam right now. First Madam is still unconscious, so Madam Dowager is very anxious. When she saw that you weren't here, she became even more anxious. Qin Yining understood Mammy Qin's meaning and explained, I was afraid that the doctor would be too far away and wouldn't be able to make it in time. He wiped off his sweat and anxiously urged Bing Tang, quickly go and take a look at my mother. Bing Tang nodded and hurriedly ran into the room. When Mammy Chin saw Qin Yining so anxious, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. At such a critical moment, it was her own daughter who was able to help. In the past 2 days, such a big thing had happened at Duke Ding's mansion, but Miss Huining didn't seem to be anxious. Moreover, she had asked carefully just now and learned that it was Miss Lu who went to the ancestral hall to report the news. Miss Lu and Miss Huining had been friends for a long time, so it was easy for her to figure out the crux of the matter. Mammy Chin sighed. Miss, don't be anxious. Perhaps First Madam is just too sad. Everyone has to experience both good and bad things in their lives. After experiencing all 3 disasters and 8 misfortunes, their lives are complete. Don't be sad. Try to comfort First Madam. Mammy Chin is right, Qin Yining nodded and then said with a wry smile, to tell you the truth, I'm really panicking. Although I haven't been home for a long time, other than our family members, the second closest family to me is my maternal grandfather's family. Now that such a big thing has happened to their family, I feel really bad. However, as a woman, there's nothing I can do. As they spoke, the two had already walked up the stairs together. Qin Yining continued, right now, all I can think of is to comfort my mother and tell her not to be sad anymore. It's fine as long as I'm filial to Madame Dowager. Mammy Chin nodded. You're right. She knew that Qin Yining was a sensible person and would never act rashly. Previously, old Madame was still worried that Qin Yining would do something extreme for maternal grandfather's family. It seemed that she had thought too much. At this time, Bing Tang had already treated the Sun clan. He replied to old Madame and Qin Yining, who had just entered. The first Madame fainted because she was too sad. Why don't we let her have a good rest and try taking some calming medicine? Old Madame saw that the Sun clan didn't have any serious illness. Even if she fell in front of Ci Shao Garden, there was no reason for them to blackmail her. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. With a calm face, she said, forget it. Let her take the medicine and rest first. We'll talk about other things later. Old Madame also didn't want to bear the reputation of being an evil mother-in-law, but the Sun clan had offended her just now and even scolded her as an old witch. She couldn't pursue this matter now. She couldn't lock the unconscious Sun clan back into the ancestral hall, right? Moreover, everyone knew that such a big thing had just happened to the Sun clan's maternal family. This Sun clan really knew how to feint. They didn't faint earlier or later, but they just had to faint at this time. Old Madame glared at the Sun clan. Then, she went out with a cold face. From beginning to end, she didn't say a word to Qin Yining. Mammy Chin followed old Madame out and whispered Qin Yining's explanation just now. Old Madame listened, and her expression became slightly better. At least she's sensible. In the room, Qin Yining sent away the irrelevant people and only left Bing Tang to guard the door. Seeing that there was no one around, he squatted on the steps and whispered in the Sun clan's ear, Mother. Sun clan suddenly opened her eyes and looked around to see that there were no outsiders. She sat up and pulled Qin Yining's hand, saying anxiously, Sister Yi, have you arranged everything? I've already thought of a way to send the message out. Mother, don't worry. I just have to trouble you to pretend to faint first. Otherwise, I'm worried that old Madame will immediately punish you. Sun clan's tears fell down when she heard this. She didn't dare to cry out loud, afraid that it would attract old Madame's people. She could only cover her mouth and sob sadly in a low voice. Your maternal grandfather's family passed away too tragically. From the way I see it, your grandmother simply wants me to sever my relationship with your maternal grandfather's family. Your maternal grandfather's body hasn't even turned cold yet, and your grandmother wants to divorce me. Why am I so unlucky to have married into such a family? The more Sun Clan spoke, the sadder she cried. Qin Yining could only hold her hand and comfort her in a low voice. Mother, regardless of what old madam is like, at least father is good. To be honest, father knows that I secretly ordered people to rent out maternal grandmother and the others. I also plan to arrange for people to bury maternal grandfather and the others. Father even secretly instructed me to do this. Is that so? Sun Clan's face was full of tears as she looked at Qin Yining with hope. Qin Yining nodded and said, "It's just that father's identity is special. Even if he wanted to, it wasn't convenient for him to stand up for himself. He could only secretly instruct me. Mother, you should be able to understand father's dilemma." Sun Clan's heart felt a little better. She nodded and said, "Of course I can understand. That's why mother has to be strong and live well with father. Even maternal grandfather and the others in the netherworld will be gratified to see that you're living well. Moreover, if you're not living well yourself, how can you spare the energy to take care of maternal grandmother and the others? I've already arranged for people to take maternal grandmother and the others to my business. In the future, when maternal grandfather and the others are no longer around, our family still has some ability. Shouldn't we take more care of maternal grandmother and the others?" Sun Clan's mother nodded when she heard this, and there was a little more determination in her eyes. Qin Yining's heart only calmed down a little when he saw Sun Clan's reaction. The more difficult the problem, the more we have to be strong. The dead are already gone, and the living have to shoulder more responsibilities. Sun Clan's mother had already been moved by Qin Yining's words, and tears once again welled up in her eyes. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Mother, don't be sad. Take this opportunity to sleep first. I'll stay here with you." Sun Clan's mother was helped to lie down by Qin Yining. Looking at her charming and gentle eyes, she was inwardly moved. However, when she thought about how Qin Yining still hadn't come to see her, she felt very disappointed. While feeling sad, moved, disappointed, anxious, and angry, Sun Clan's mother unknowingly fell asleep. Qin Yining sat on the foot of the bed and lay down on the edge of the bed to take a nap. The room was quiet. The candlelight flickered, and shadows were cast on the lattice window. The person outside the back window sighed softly and leaped onto the roof. After a few leaps, he arrived outside Qin Manor. Huzi, who was hiding behind a large tree, saw his master come out. He looked around and quietly went up to greet him. "Master, you're back. Everything has been arranged. It's just that our people were a little late. The corpse has already been taken away by several groups of people. Right now, we're planning to arrange for people to investigate who did it." Pang Xiao took the cloak that Huzi handed over and put it on. He said indifferently, "There's no need to investigate. She did it." Huzi exclaimed in surprise, "Master, are you talking about fourth young Miss Qin?" Chapter 82. Huzi looked at Pang Xiao's soft eyes and laughed in his heart. He teased, "Master, you are a smart person. How can the person you like be a fool?" Pang Xiao glanced at Huzi indifferently. When did he say that he had taken a liking to her? "Mr. Zheng, you're the one who started this nonsense." "Ah. How can master blame it on me?" Seeing Pang Xiao walk away, Huzi quickly caught up with him and nagged in a low voice, "It was master who liked her. Otherwise, why did master come here in a hurry when the Sun family was in trouble? Not only did you have to help her collect her grandfather's corpse, but you also sneaked into her house like a burglar. If this doesn't count, then what does? You have just been stripped of your position as the Grand Marshal and have been scolded by the Emperor. Now you still have the heart to care about others. You." Huzi nagged and didn't notice that the person in front of him suddenly stopped. He almost bumped into Pang Xiao's back. "Master." Huzi swallowed nervously and suddenly wanted to slap himself. Really, his mouth was too cheap. He touched the pot that didn't boil. Pang Shao didn't want to massacre the city and wrote a letter to the emperor. He offended the emperor and angered him. He hurriedly sent 2 eunuchs. One passed an imperial edict to strip his master of his position as the Grand Marshal, and the other passed an oral edict to scold his master. He said that he was soft-hearted, a person who fishes for fame, and is useless. Not only that, the emperor directly arranged the Minister of War, Lian Xingjie, to lead the army and take over the position of the Grand Marshal. His master changed from a Grand Marshal to a Huban general. And the new Grand Marshal was an old, lecherous, and greedy man. His surname was Lian, but he was not honest at all. His name was Xingjie, and his character was not holy at all. As soon as he entered the military camp, he arranged a red tent, saying that he wanted to reward the army. There were 2 groups of soldiers and horses in the army. 9 out of 10 people were Wang Ye's Tiger Army, and 1 was from the original rebel army. Just these 10 people took turns to enter the red tent, which could ruin the atmosphere in the military camp. Lian Xingjie himself needed women to accompany him every night. Now the atmosphere in the military camp was rotten like porridge. His master was holding back his anger. He had just forcibly removed the red curtain with Rayleigh's means, causing Lian Xingjie to blow his beard and glare at him, saying that he would submit a report to impeach him. So, he quickly rushed to the capital to see the situation of the Qin family's 4th Mississippi. Did he not care? Did not like her? But he really should not have mentioned the emperor. Before the emperor ascended the throne, he, Wang Yi, and Marquis Dingbei Ji Ziyu became sworn brothers. The 3 of them were very close. Now, one came and the other was stationed in the north to resist the Taitan. The emperor sat on the high platform, but he began to be afraid of Wang Yi. He kept his men and horses and left all the dangerous places to Wang Ye's Tiger Army. Even he, a follower, could see the emperor's intentions. How could Wang Yi not know? The emperor was no longer the person who overthrew the tyranny of Beiji, who was devoted to the people. Huzi's mind was full of thoughts. It was only a moment outside. He smiled apologetically and gently slapped his own mouth. He changed the topic and said, "But Miss Qin is really chivalrous and resourceful." Pang Shao nodded and continued walking. Huzi breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "That day at Xiangu Temple, Tian Jizi said she had a good marriage and that the Red Luan star had moved. At that time, she looked at you and said that, if Master likes her, why don't you just snatch her away? In any case, the family Qin will be finished in the future." Pang Shao said, "It's not time yet. Was it time to snatch her away? Or was it time for the family Qin to be finished?" Huzi was confused. But seeing that Wang Yi was too lazy to talk, he did not continue to nag. The 2 of them rushed to a large mansion with 7 entrances and 7 exits. They knocked regularly on an inconspicuous corner door hidden under vines in the back garden. Someone immediately opened the door and invited them in. On the golden plaque hanging high above the main entrance of this large mansion, the 2 characters Chao Mansion reflected the moonlight and the light of the large red lanterns in the night. It was glowing faintly. Qin Huayuan returned to the mansion early the next morning. As soon as he entered, he heard about what happened last night. He did not say much and directly went to greet old Madam. At this moment, old Madam was talking with her daughters-in-law, granddaughters-in-law, and granddaughters in the main hall of Xixiao Garden. Second Madam explained with a smile, "Sixth girl made a mistake yesterday, so I locked her in the room to read female precepts. I heard that eldest sister-in-law fainted and is now recuperating at mother's place." Old Madam's experienced hand holding the teacup paused. The jade ring on her thumb and the teacup made a crisp sound. She didn't care about what mistakes Sixth Miss made, but her anger from last night was aroused by Second Madam's words. She put the teacup on the small table with a gloomy face. Second Madam was startled. She was stunned and speechless for a while. The atmosphere in the room, which was originally slightly relaxed, suddenly became tense. Fortunately, the voice of the little girl outside broke the silence. "Old Madam, First Master is back." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Who didn't know that First Master was Old Madam's favorite? Sure enough, a smile appeared on Old Madam's face. "Quickly invite him in. He was in the palace last night and didn't sleep. He must be exhausted today. Lujuan, prepare some food for First Master. Let him eat and have a good sleep." Mammy Qin smiled and agreed. Qin Huayuan had already taken off his cloak outside and entered the room to salute Old Madam. The womenfolk also saluted Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan looked left and right. He didn't see the Sun Clan and Qin Yining. He only saw Qin Huaining wearing a powdered brocade jacket and skirt. He didn't know what she was thinking about. Qin Huayuan looked at her clothes and frowned. Sister Yi is taking care of the Sun Clan. He sat down on the round-backed chair next to Old Madam and took a sip of the tea served by head maidservant Ru Yi. With this sentence, everyone understood that Qin Huayuan already knew about yesterday's matter. Old Madam was a bit embarrassed. After all, she was the one who wanted to divorce the Sun Clan. She didn't ask for Qin Huayuan's permission before saying those words. That was why the Sun Clan fainted from anger. After all, they were husband and wife, right? Old Madam didn't answer, so others didn't say anything. Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Huaining. "Sister Hui, why don't you go take care of your mother?" Qin Huaining, who was suddenly called, suddenly raised her head and met Qin Huayuan's knowing eyes. Her heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly said, "Yes, daughter wants to go." Originally, daughter wanted to go after paying respects to Old Madam. And Sister Yi already took care of her all night. It should be your turn. Qin Huayuan waved his hand faintly. "You can go now. Call Sister Yi over. I have something to discuss with her." Qin Huayuan's words contained too much information and shocked everyone. First of all, although he wasn't at home, he knew everything that happened in the Fu like the back of his hand. Second of all, in Qin Huayuan's heart, Qin Yining had already risen to a position where he could discuss matters. He was clearly raising his daughter like a son. Chapter 83. Qin Huayuan looked at Qin Huaining's expression. He didn't need to guess carefully to understand what she was thinking. When Qin Huaining was the legitimate daughter, he didn't have any feelings for her. He only wanted to find a good family for her in the future. Therefore, when he found out that she wasn't his biological daughter, his feelings were different from those of the Sun Clan. He lamented that his biological daughter had wandered the streets and suffered so much. There were several times when she couldn't survive. What was more depressing was that he boasted of being smart, but he was fooled by others. He didn't know how the person who did this mocked him behind his back. Qin Huaining thought that she hid her emotions very well. Even if she could escape everyone's eyes, she couldn't escape Qin Huayuan's discerning eyes, which had been trained in the imperial court. Sister Hui. Qin Huayuan slowly opened his mouth. Qin Huaining heard this and raised her head. Her line of sight suddenly collided with Qin Huayuan's, scaring her so much that she hurriedly lowered her head. "Father. There are a few words. I'll say it and you'll listen. How much you understand depends on yourself." "Yes. Father, please instruct me." Qin Huaining's hands hanging by her side clenched into fists. Qin Huayuan gently put down the teacup and said in a gentle voice, "You know your own origins. I've been fooled for many years. After the incident, I could have sent you back to the health hall. Don't you think so? Qin Huining's face was as pale as paper. The fear in her heart spread to her limbs and bones. The blood on her hands and feet almost froze. Father is right. Her voice was dry and trembling. She wanted to defend herself, but she couldn't say a word. She didn't think so much before. She only felt that she was innocent. The old madam, the Sun clan, her maternal grandmother, and the others were biased to no end. After Qin Yining returned, not only did he take away everything she had, but he also beat and scolded her and stepped on her underfoot. However, she didn't expect that her existence, to Qin Huaiyuan, was proof that he had been fooled. It was a stain in her wise and far-sighted father's life. How could she have forgotten about this? His father was such an all-powerful figure. How could he allow his life to be tainted? Why did he want to keep a stain like her by his side? Now that Qin Huaiyuan said this, could it be that he wanted to send her away? Old Madam was also nervous. She anxiously called out, "Brother Mang." Qin Huaiyuan smiled warmly at Old Madam and waved his hand to indicate that she shouldn't panic. You are a girl that our family has raised for 14 years. In Old Madam's heart, in your mother's and my heart, even if we know that we are not related by blood, we still regard you as a member of the family Qin. We have never treated you as an outsider, but you have already treated yourself as an outsider. The room was silent. Everyone looked at Qin Huining with different expressions. Even after Sister Yi returned home, your food and clothing were all provided in accordance with the standards of the other young ladies in our manor. You were never treated unfairly. Think about it carefully. Isn't that the case? I hope that you can focus on the right path. I can pretend that nothing happened in the past, but in the future, it's up to you. That's all I have to say. You can go take care of your mother. Qin Huining's entire body felt like it had fallen into an ice cellar, but his face was burning red. She originally thought that her father was busy with court affairs and wasn't at home all day, so he didn't know much about the family's affairs. No matter what she did, she would at most coax Old Madam. Today, Qin Huaiyuan's words overturned all of her ideas. Qin Huining didn't dare to hesitate anymore. She bowed in fear and retreated. Qin Huaiyuan looked at her back and shook his head. His slender hand picked up the teacup again. Second Furen, who was at the side, felt even more embarrassed. It turned out that eldest uncle knew everything. He usually didn't care about the family's affairs because he was too lazy to care. This time, Madam Sun had rushed out of the ancestral hall in a fit of anger because 6th Miss had gone to report the news. She had even fainted in Ci Shao Garden and was still bedridden. If Qin Huaiyuan blamed the second branch for this, her husband would no longer be able to hold his head up high in the imperial court. It had to be known that second master only had an unimportant position in the Ministry of Rights and was just eating his salary. The people outside were busy trying to curry favor with the crown prince and the grand preceptor, but they had no way to do so. They were a family, but it didn't make sense that they would offend someone because of an insensible concubine's daughter's mistake. Second Furen smiled and said, "Yesterday, the 6th young miss was impetuous and I already reprimanded her. She made her eldest aunt so angry that she fainted. It was because I didn't discipline her that there was no harm. Eldest uncle, please don't take it to heart." Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Sister-in-law, you don't need to blame yourself. The cause of this matter was Sister Hui. You really can't be blamed." Second Furen inwardly sighed in relief. It was rare that Qin Huaiyuan was a person who understood everything clearly. It was good that he knew it was the eldest branch's adopted daughter who stirred up trouble. 4th young miss has arrived. A young maidservant passed on the message from outside. Not long after, Qin Yining walked in wearing a light white plain satin robe and a dark cyan 8-piece skirt. Her long hair was tied into two flat buns with a dark cyan ribbon. She didn't wear any makeup or hairpins as she walked in. She was originally tall and beautiful with a charming appearance. Now that she was dressed in such a plain manner, coupled with her pale complexion and cyan eyes, she made people feel pity for her even more. Compared to the Qin Huining who was dressed in such a delicate manner just now, this was the reaction that a member of the maternal family should have after passing away. Everyone couldn't help but think in their hearts, in the end, mutton paste is not on a dog's body. Those who aren't related by blood are still lacking by a layer. In the end, Qin Huining is a bit too cold-hearted. Qin Yining came forward and bowed to the old madam and Qin Huayuan. She also bowed to the womenfolk in the room one by one before standing to the side in a well-behaved manner. Qin Huayuan then asked, "Is your mother feeling better?" Replying to father, "Mother's body is fine. It's just that because she was too sad, her mind is a bit unclear. Last night, she was talking nonsense in her sleep. When daughter heard it, my heart ached. It would be strange if anyone's mental state was good when such a thing happened to their family." Everyone sighed. Qin Huayuan said, "You should persuade your mother, but you also need to pay attention to your own body. I know you are filial, but there are some things that can be left to the servants to do. Look at your complexion. You are still young and are still growing. You need to pay more attention." "Yes. Thank you, father, for your concern." Qin Yining was touched and smiled. Her eyes were moist, as if they could speak. Being looked at like a small animal, Qin Huayuan couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. The commoners have already taken the initiative to bury the male member of Duke Ding's mansion. Go back and tell your mother that even if the emperor wants to pursue the matter, he can't. This matter will end like this. Qin Huayuan was telling her that her arrangement was successful and that the emperor couldn't pursue the matter because he cherished his reputation. She couldn't dig up the person from the grave again. Wouldn't that arouse the public's anger? Qin Yining let out a big sigh of relief and nodded, "Yes, I will definitely tell mother. If mother knows that maternal grandfather's family's benevolence, righteousness, and wisdom didn't go to waste, she will certainly be happy." Qin Huayuan nodded and turned to the old madam, saying, "There is one thing that I need mother to take care of for me." The old madam said, "What is it? Don't hesitate to say it." "The emperor issued an edict to bestow the eldest daughter of Duke Chao's father-in-law to me as a noble concubine. He wants her to be brought in before New Year's Eve. Now that the Sun clan is sick and the daughter of Duke Chao's father-in-law has a special status, I hope that mother can make the appropriate arrangements and not fail to live up to the emperor's grace." As soon as these words came out, the entire room was silent. The eldest daughter of Duke Chao's father-in-law, wasn't that Empress Chao's elder sister? This concubine Chao, who was about to marry into the family, was now 30 years old. Because of her devastatingly beautiful appearance, she took a long time to find a husband and didn't marry until she was 20 years old. Who knew that she would become a widow in less than 3 years and live alone until now? Many people were saying that it was time for her to remarry. Who would have thought that the emperor would actually bestow her to Qin Huayuan as a concubine? Even if everyone didn't understand the twists and turns of the imperial court, Imperial tutor Chao was impeached and lost his position. Qin Huayuan immediately became the imperial tutor. The hatred between these two families had already been formed. What was the emperor thinking by bringing the daughter of Duke Chao's father-in-law into the Qin manor? What's more, this was the elder sister of the demon empress. It was inevitable that her appearance wouldn't be bad, but who could guarantee her character? After this concubine entered the family, if she was arrogant and domineering and had the support of Duke Chao and the demon empress behind her, how could their family live a peaceful life? Everyone was a little nervous. Old Madam thought for a moment and smiled, "Good, good. Although you are the imperial tutor now, Duke Chao has been in power for so many years. He has many disciples and old subordinates. His foundation is deeper than yours. The emperor gave his daughter to you as a concubine, which is also helping you. Our family and the Chao family have become in-laws. How many misunderstandings have been resolved? In the future, with the Chao family as your in-laws, you and the emperor will be in-laws. Very good. Very good. The more old madam said, the more refreshed she felt. She said with a smile on her face, "Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. It will be done grandly and won't be wronged." Qin Huayuan nodded. Second madam and third madam congratulated Qin Huayuan for getting a beautiful concubine. Seeing that there was no big matter, Qin Huayuan stood up and said, "This son will leave first. I will go to see the Sun clan. I will go out later." Old madam said worriedly, "You should sleep first. What matter do you have to do in a hurry? Don't harm your body." Old madam chased after Qin Huayuan and nagged him. She sent him to the corridor before entering the door. She excitedly pulled second madam and third madam over and began to discuss how to get a concubine. At this time, all the young ladies were asked to leave. Qin Yining wore a dark blue cotton cloak and went to the courtyard. Third young miss, seventh young miss, and eighth young miss all comforted her for a while before returning. Qin Yining stood in the corridor and suddenly smiled helplessly. Had she fallen to the point where she needed people's sympathy again? It seemed that there were no real idiots in this fu. Everyone could see that Chao Shi had a very high status in old madam's heart even before she married into the family. In the past, old madam curried favor with Duke Ding's family for her son's career. In a few days, she would curry favor with the Chao family. In the past, new people would only smile and not old people would cry. With such a powerful concubine entering the family, how would her arrogant and upright mother deal with it? If a person was always suppressed by others, it would be fine. However, the Sun clan was used to being high and mighty. With such a huge difference, she was afraid that she would be even more irritated. Thinking about it, her father went to see her mother in person because he wanted to explain and comfort her face to face. Qin Yining sighed and quickly left Xixiao Garden. Early in the morning, she received news from Mother Jing that Duke Ding's family had been properly settled. She had to hurry to see the situation. Chapter 84. Grandmother. As soon as Qin Yining entered the door and saw the house full of women in mourning, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. Reality was so cruel. In just one night, the destruction of the family's property had been done, and the family was separated forever. When Duchess Ding saw Qin Yining, tears welled up in her eyes. "Sister Yi, you're here. Is it okay for you to come here?" "It's okay. I came here very carefully. It's not eye-catching." Qin Yining bowed to his two aunts and cousins, and everyone returned the greeting. When they sat down, they didn't know what to say for a while. Everyone was immersed in grief. Among the men who could think of the tragic death of their family members, someone couldn't help sobbing. This sob was like a wildfire that could start a prairie fire, drawing out people's tears. Qin Yining hugged his sad grandmother and aunt and cried bitterly. Qin Yining cried until his eyes were red and swollen. Duchess Ding wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and said in a hoarse voice, "I've heard the news outside. Some people secretly helped to bury your grandfather and the others. I know this was arranged by you. You didn't stay out of it at the critical moment. You saved your fifth cousin-in-law and eighth cousin-in-law, saved your cousin's flesh and blood, and even saved your grandfather and the others from the fate of dying on the street. I don't know how to thank you, and there's nothing I can take out to thank you." "What are you talking about? We're a family. If I only cared about protecting myself when something like this happened to my family and didn't care about you, what kind of person would I be? What's more, the reason why I have the ability to do something now is all thanks to grandmother's reward. If grandmother hadn't given me the Zhaoyun agency and asked Master Zhong to help me, I wouldn't have been able to do it alone even if I wanted to. Eldest aunt wiped her tears and said, Sister Yi, don't say that. We all know your character, and we all remember your kindness, but I really can't repay you. Don't say that. Qin Yining waved his hand and said, Actually, I couldn't have done all this by myself. My father helped me in secret. Then, she lowered her voice and said, when the emperor copied the Fu, he actually had the intention to take back the Zhaoyun company and run it himself. However, he didn't expect that grandmother had already given it to me. Then you have to be more careful in the future. Duchess Ding wiped her tears with her sleeve and rubbed her swollen and painful temples. Without a servant to serve him, Qin Yining stood up and stood beside Duchess Ding. He massaged her with moderate strength and said in a low voice, Yes, I will pay attention. But now the emperor is almost scared out of his wits by Dezhou, and the people are constantly talking and cursing. He has no time to take care of the Zhaoyun agency. But the people in our residence. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then said, In a moment, maternal grandmother will make a list. In 2 days, the servants in the estate will be sold. I will buy what they should buy. Otherwise, you can't have no servants to serve you. Among the people I know, Bao Mama is the first one I must bring back. Hearing this, Duchess Ding's eyes were filled with tears again. She gently patted the back of Qin Yining's hand. The cousins were also very grateful. They had been to the Jiaofang for less than a night, but they had already seen the dark and miserable side of it. They thought that they would suffer if they lived. For example, first aunt, third aunt, and third cousin-in-law had even thought of keeping chastity for the Sun family with their deaths. They didn't expect that Qin Yining had rented them out before they made up their minds and acted. In the past, such a family as Duke Ding's mansion didn't care about such a small amount of money. But now, they were penniless. It cost a lot of money to rent them out in the Zhaoyun agency. What's more, Qin Yining didn't intend to let them go out to work. Instead, he wanted to raise them here, and it seemed that there would be a lot of servants. It was not a small expense to raise so many of them. In any case, they felt this sincere feeling and were very grateful. Duchess Ding took Qin Yining's hand and asked her to sit beside her. I'll go back and carefully discuss with your aunt and your sisters to see who can stay and who can't stay. Qin Yining nodded and said, I specially brought Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu here. They will stay here to serve us for the next 2 days. Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu immediately came forward and saluted. Qiu Lu was loyal and upright. Bing Tang and Song Lan returned to the family Qin at the beginning because of Duke Ding's mansion. Now, they naturally had an inseparable relationship with Duke Ding's mansion. Duchess Ding held Qin Yining in her arms and stroked her long hair. She had thousands of words of gratitude and emotion, but she couldn't say a word for a while. She thought for a long time, and her eyes gradually became firm, as if she had made up her mind in an instant. Sister Yi, where's your mother? Qin Yining didn't want her grandmother and the others to worry. They were already suffering enough in their hearts, so why should she tell them about the Sun clan and bother them? Even if her grandmother was more considerate, at this time, she was afraid that she would only be physically and mentally exhausted. The womenfolk of this family still counted on her grandmother in the future. She didn't want to add more trouble. When my mother heard the news here, she was too sad and fell ill. She is now recuperating in Xingning Garden. Miss Huining, Mother Jean, and Kai Ju are all by her side to serve her. My father also invited an imperial physician from the palace. Bing Tang has also seen her. It's just that she was anxious, but it's not a big problem. She will recover in 2 days. At that time, my mother and I will come to pay our respects to you." Hearing this, Duchess Ding fixed her eyes on Qin Yining and nodded slightly after a while. "You are a sensible child." Her voice was close to a sigh. Qin Yining knew that Duchess Ding was a smart person. In fact, she knew everything in her heart. However, there were some things that couldn't be said, and some things that were useless to say. It would only increase her sadness. No matter how many schemes she had, they were useless in the face of absolute strength. No matter how many methods she had to have the ability to use them. Qin Yining went to see her fifth cousin-in-law, who was in confinement. The baby in swaddling clothes was sleeping soundly in her mother's arms. Her fifth cousin-in-law was lying on the bed, covered with a thick quilt. Her head was tied with a green ribbon on her forehead. Her long hair was scattered, and her eyes were dull. Tears kept falling from the corners of her eyes, wetting a large part of the pillow. Her cheeks were pale and sunken overnight. Qin Yining was shocked to see her like this. Her fifth cousin-in-law and her fifth cousin had a deep relationship. She was afraid that she was ready to die now. She strode forward and took her fifth cousin-in-law's hand. "Sister-in-law, fifth cousin has a message for you." Her fifth cousin-in-law's eyes suddenly widened. Qin Yining said, "You just gave birth naturally, and I told fifth cousin and grandfather the news that you and your daughter are safe." Fifth cousin cried with joy and said that it was good to have a daughter. A daughter is a mother's little cotton-padded jacket, unlike a son who only makes a mother cry. He said that your daughter will be filial to you. Fifth cousin also said that he wants you to live strong and live well with your child. Fifth cousin did say something similar. In fact, there was another sentence that was sent by Master Zhou, but she felt that it was not appropriate to say it to her fifth cousin-in-law now. Fifth cousin also said, "Shuang is still young. If there is a suitable one, marry again. Don't be alone for the rest of your life." Chapter 85. The fifth sister-in-law's eyes were wide open. Although she was looking at Qin Yining, her eyes fell on the void. Tears kept pouring out of her eyes, like a spring that would not dry up. Seeing her like this, Duchess Ding slowly stepped forward and slowly sat on the edge of the bed with her hands on her knees. Her voice was vicissitude and calm. "Knowing that you gave birth safely, he can go with peace of mind. The dead are gone, and the living have to be stronger. It's easy for them to close their eyes. Do we, the living, have to bear these responsibilities? Sister Shuang, I know that you are a young couple and have a good relationship. Listen to your grandmother. Just think that he is traveling far away. You will finally meet him in the future. Grandmother." The fifth sister-in-law choked with sobs. She held the child with one hand and grabbed Duchess Ding's hand with the other, as if she wanted to crush her fingers. Everyone couldn't help crying again. In the face of such a big disaster, they would either be defeated by setbacks or hold their breath and straighten their backs that had been bent. The words that Duke Ding had told Duchess Ding before he left were still fresh in their minds. And Duchess Ding lived up to her reputation. At the critical moment, she, who was the weakest and the oldest, should be the one crying the most, but she was able to calmly analyze everything and lead the panicked womenfolk to choose the right path. Qin Yining looked at Duchess Ding with admiration, but he felt distressed for her. The only thing she could do was to take good care of her grandmother and the others and not let them eat and wear their clothes. When the tragic end of Duke Ding's family was known to everyone, the credence of Dezhou, which was posted all over the street, swept over again. This time, not only the bulletin boards were conspicuous, but also the streets and alleys had flyers fluttering in the wind. Those who could read could pick up one and read the content on it. Dezhou killed 20,000 captives because of the Yan Emperor's charge. Another 20,000 men were never able to see their parents again. As for the good emperor of the Yen dynasty, he still lived a life of luxury with the demon empress without any worries. In order to beg for the forgiveness of the Dezhou emperor, he even forced the grandson of the Duke of Ding's family to offer up his brain. However, the Dezhou people made a fuss and scolded him. He was so scared that he killed all the men of the Sun family. He didn't even spare the 5-year-old child. After killing them, he immediately went to the Dezhou dynasty and shamelessly begged the emperor of Zhou to appease his anger. The emperor was so muddle-headed, lecherous, and cowardly that he didn't hesitate to kill his loyal subjects. Everyone found it difficult to calm down. As the new year approached, Jingdo was completely immersed in grief and anger. Even the common people felt a chill in their hearts when they thought of the rumors from that day, Chao Guozhang's domineering killing in the street, and the emperor's indifference. The Sun clan was even more bitterly disappointed than the commoners. Mother. The Sun clan was wearing a sapphire blue robe, silver jewelry, and a black cloak. As soon as she entered the door, she hugged Duchess Ding's leg and cried, "Mother, Qin Meng, that ungrateful person, he failed me and our family." When Duchess Ding saw her crying daughter, she felt her head buzzing. This daughter of hers was really useless. She only knew how to complain and cry. It was no wonder that she raised a daughter like Qin Huaining. "Get up and talk." Duchess Ding rubbed her forehead. Mother Bao, who had just been redeemed, helped the Sun clan to sit on the embroidered stool. "Madam, don't cry. You have to take care of Madam's health." Such a big thing had happened to her family, but the Sun clan didn't do much for her family. They didn't even come to see her in the past 2 days. They were all busy with Qin Yining. Mother Bao already had a lot of complaints about the Sun clan. The Sun clan sniffled and said with grievance, "Qin Meng wants to take that slut from the Chao family as his concubine. He's going to bring her in today. No matter how I persuade him, it's useless. He even deceived me, saying that the emperor gave Madame Chao to him. Mother, how can he treat me like this? If it weren't for father's promotion, would he be where he is today? Now that something has happened to our family, their family is so ungrateful. It's really disappointing." Duchess Ding raised her eyes and looked at the Sun clan's pale face, blue eyes, and eyes that were swollen like walnuts from crying. She sighed and said, "Sister Han, you're not a child anymore. There are some things that I have taught you a long time ago. You don't want to take it to heart and work hard to manage your life. You only think about your family background. Can you sit on your family's merit book and look down on your husband's family for the rest of your life? I've said this before. Now that the Sun clan has fallen, you have no one to rely on. In the future, when I'm not by your side, you have to use your brain more." The Sun clan's tears burst out again when she heard this. "Mother, why aren't you by my side?" Duchess Ding touched her face and turned to look at Qin Yining. "This time, Sister Yi has helped us a lot. We can't repay her." "Grandmother, don't say that. This is what I should do. I'm also filial to my mother," Qin Yining said seriously. "I know. You're a sensible child. Now I've thought of a place to go and have contacted the appropriate people. Today, I'll start to move. In the future, you should serve your mother well and live a good life in the family Qin. Let's contact each other less." As soon as she finished speaking, the room was so quiet that one could hear the sound of breathing. The Sun clan's daughter said in a panic, "Mother, are you angry with me?" I just have no place to vent my grievances, so I came to tell you. I know I shouldn't have. Mother, don't be angry. Don't leave me. It's not directed at you." Duchess Ding sighed and said, "Sister Han, you should trust your husband's words more in the future and listen to Sister Yi's advice more. That Madame Chao must have been given to the son-in-law by the emperor. Her origin is not simple. You have to be careful with her in the future. Don't believe anyone's words easily. If you encounter something, you have to discuss it with Sister E before you do it. Sister E is a person who understands. The Sun Clan's daughter listened to Duchess Ding's last words. She became even more flustered. Qin Yining had already understood Duchess Ding's meaning. He frowned and said, "Grandmother, you really don't have to worry. I didn't create the rule that Zhao Yinci rented people from the musical house. It's a rule passed down from my ancestors. I'm willing to take our family here and raise them. This is also the freedom of Zhao Yinci. How can the emperor extend his hand to us?" "Silly girl." Duchess Ding said, "Do you think the emperor is reasonable? If he were reasonable, our family wouldn't be in such a situation. Your father's identity and status are special. It's not appropriate for us to stay. Besides, I have something to do." Speaking of this, Duchess Ding stood up and patted the Sun Clan's head. Then she said to Qin Yining lovingly, "Although you haven't been home for a long time, I can see that you are a smart child. Let's have less contact with each other in the future. It's a blessing for us to live our own lives and die peacefully." Qin Yining frowned when he heard this. Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu, who were serving on the side, all felt that Duchess Ding's words were too cold-blooded. At that time, in order to rescue these women, in order to send the news to the prison of the Ministry of Justice so that the men would not be worried before they died, in order to collect the bodies of the men of the Sun Clan, and in order to help their masters find their loyal servants, she spent more than just money. How much did she worry and how much risk did she take? Chapter 86. Qin Yining understood that such a big thing had happened in Duke Ding's mansion and caused indelible damage to the womenfolk. Sometimes, it was easier to die than to live and bear all the pain. Her grandmother was a woman who had lost everything overnight. She had to brace herself and grit her teeth to live on with these womenfolk who had no idea what to do. The road ahead would be very bumpy and difficult, especially when they still had hatred in their hearts. Although Qin Huaiyuan acquiesced to her help and didn't take advantage of them to elevate himself, he was still the emperor's favorite minister and the crown prince's grand preceptor. Today, Qin Huaiyuan was forced to take Madame Chao as his concubine. One day, her marriage might have an inseparable relationship with the royal family. The womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion hated the royal family, and it was inevitable that the Qin family and the royal family were inextricably linked. Their paths were different, and it was useless for her grandmother to say anything. The only thing she could do was to stay away from them. Qin Yining wasn't angry or disappointed. She was just sad about this difficult world. Seeing Qin Yining's expression, Duchess Ding sighed softly and patted her shoulder again to comfort her. In the end, she didn't say anything else. Sun Clan couldn't control her emotions. She covered her face and sobbed. In the past, her eldest and second aunts doted on her youngest aunt and comforted her when they saw her like this. Now, they were drowning in grief and had no time to care about her. Qin Yining pulled Sun Clan's arm and motioned for her to stop crying. Seeing that she really stopped sobbing, she said, "Grandmother said that she had contacted a place to go." "Where do you want to go?" "With such a big family, all the properties of Duke Ding's mansion have been confiscated. You are all womenfolk, and there are no guards to protect you. Where can you settle down?" Seeing that Qin Yining was sincere and didn't have any ill feelings, Duchess Ding couldn't help but smile with relief. "Sister E, if you are worried, you can follow us and have a look. This place is not far from here." Qin Yining looked at Duchess Ding's face and couldn't help thinking quickly. It was not far from here and could accommodate so many womenfolk. Moreover, Duchess Ding could bring the womenfolk to live in a place with peace of mind. She suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said in surprise, "You want to go to the Fairy Lady Temple?" Duchess Ding was surprised that she had guessed it so quickly and nodded. Qin Yining and the members of the Sun clan, along with Mother Jean, Kai Ju, Song Lan, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu, stayed behind to help Duchess Ding's family. During this time, they even took the time to instruct Song Lan to call Master Zhong. They immediately took out 100 taels worth of banknotes and exchanged for a total of 3,000 taels. The mistress and servant sat in 6 large carriages and arrived at the Fairy Lady Temple in the afternoon. A little Taoist nun had seen them from afar and rushed in to report. When the group arrived at the mountain gate, Fairy Lu led a few young Taoist nuns to welcome them. Supreme Tai Tianzuandu E. Old Madam, how are the ladies, grannies, and ladies? I heard that you were planning to seek shelter. I have ordered people to clean up the courtyard for you. Fairy Lu was wearing a grayish-blue Taoist robe and a new green cloak. She looked round and had a shrewd smile on her face. It was unknown if she had gained weight again. Thank you for taking us in, Fairy Lu. Duchess Ding sighed and led the womenfolk into the mountain gate with Fairy Lu. Fairy Lu, you were right about everything back then. Alas, I hope I wasn't right. Fairy Lu also sighed. When she saw Bing Tang, who was looking at her with big watery eyes and dressed up neatly and beautifully, she couldn't help laughing. Oh, it's Jingjin. Come and let Master have a look. Master. Bing Tang let go of Qin Yining's arm and stepped forward to salute with a smile. Fairy Lu patted Bing Tang's head and said, It seems that you are doing well now. Miss Qin is really a benevolent and righteous person. Qin Yining held the Sun clan's arm and smiled. You flatter me. I don't deserve it. Fairy Lu looked at the womenfolk behind her who were dressed in white. She then saw 2 old women supporting a pale-faced young woman. Behind them was a pregnant woman who was holding a baby. She said, The weather is cold. Why don't we let the madams and grannies settle down in their rooms first? All right. Thank you, Fairy Lu. Duchess Ding smiled gratefully. Fairy Lu called 2 of her disciples over. Take everyone to the side courtyard first. Yes, Master. The 2 little Taoist nuns bowed and led everyone to the side courtyard on the west side. Fairy Lu led Duchess Ding, the Sun clan, and Qin Yining to her courtyard. While walking, Fairy Lu kept looking at the pale-faced Sun clan. Who would have thought that when they arrived at the courtyard gate, they heard a young man complaining, Why were you gone for so long? Master was waiting for you. The 2 sides walked across each other. Qin Yining and Bing Tang both widened their eyes. The young man in front of them was 17 or 18 years old. He was of medium height and looked strong. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His facial features were very regular. He was wearing a dark blue cotton-padded jacket with a wool jacket and a warm hat. He was also looking at them in surprise. When his eyes landed on Bing Tang, his originally fair face instantly turned red. It was the young man who covered Bing Tang's mouth in the main hall that day. If he was here, then the young man who was called Master by Fairy Lu was also here. Sure enough, when the bamboo curtain in the main room opened, a handsome young man wearing a brocade cloak with a gray fur collar walked out. He was tall, with long eyebrows and phoenix eyes. He had a gentle temperament. It was the young man Qin Yining had met. Qin Yining quickly lowered his eyes. Thinking of the scene that day, he couldn't help but blush with embarrassment. Seeing her blush, Peng Xiao couldn't help but look away awkwardly, although he had been hiding his eyes and slightly hunching his back to change his aura. Fairy Lu's shrewd eyes looked back and forth between their faces. Then she grinned and said, Come on, it's cold outside. Let's talk inside. The path here is narrow, so there's only a charcoal brazier in this room for the time being. Anyway, we've already met, and we're not strangers. Please come in. The guest had to follow the host's wishes. Since Fairy Lou said so, and Duchess Ding and her womenfolk would settle down here in the future, Qin Yining couldn't refuse. He only helped the Sun Clan and Duchess Ding into the room. The room was as warm as spring. Fairy Lou sat at the head of the table and invited everyone to make themselves comfortable. The young master sat at the head of the table on Fairy Lou's left. The strong young man stood behind him. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan sat opposite him. Qin Yining stood behind his grandmother as usual. For the time being, Bing Tang and Mother Jean were sent to the outer room. Chapter 87. The light in Xiangu Lu's eyes grew brighter. As long as she had something to do, she would have a chance to see the money. She had always felt that people should cultivate their own hobbies in life. Some people liked food, some liked beauty, and some liked money. She loved money. If she didn't love anything, it would be boring to live. Miss Qin, please tell me what you need. Qin Yining took out 2,000 taels of silver from his sleeve and stepped forward to give it to Xiangu Lu with both hands. He looked at Xiangu Lu with a smile and said, Abby Dean, you know about my grandfather's family. Today, I would like to trouble you to perform the 49-day rite of forgiveness for the dead. Here is 2,000 taels of silver. I hope you will pay more attention to this matter. I see. Xiangu Lu winked at Qin Yining knowingly. Then she counted the silver in her hand and said, Miss Qin, you are so generous. Don't worry, I will do my best. The women of Duke Ding's family are cultivating in our temple, so you can rest assured. In that case, I'll leave everything to you. Qin Yining saw that he had achieved his goal, so he smiled and retreated behind Duchess Ding. She could understand that her grandmother wanted to reduce contact with her. It was just that her family was heartbroken. If she didn't spend some money to ask Fairy Lou to take care of them, she wouldn't be able to rest assured. Duchess Ding also understood Qin Yining's intentions. The soft part of her heart was touched. She was moved and took Qin Yining's hand and patted it. The Sun Clan was surprised that Qin Yining had so much money, but the Sun Clan was also happy that their daughter was filial and was willing to help her family. Just as Xiangu Lu was counting the silver with a smile, a low magnetic voice suddenly said slowly, Miss, are you the young lady of Grand Preceptor Qin's family? Finally, he was willing to talk to her. Huzi looked at his master excitedly. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan were a little surprised. They didn't expect that a man would talk to them. Actually, if he was really a person who strictly adhered to etiquette, he would naturally avoid the conversation when he saw a woman talking. He wouldn't be like this young master who was just watching from the side. However, since they were talking in Fairy Lou's room and Fairy Lou had left this person here, they had to allow him to speak. Qin Yining looked up. Her beautiful eyes only lingered on Pang Zhao's face for a moment before she curtsied. That's me. This young master has a deep relationship with Master Lu. Now that we have met twice, I still haven't asked for young master's name and where is he from. My surname is Yao. I'm from the north, and I'm here to do business. Pang Zhao stood up and returned the greeting, using his mother's surname. So it's young Master Yao. Qin Yining lowered his head and didn't say anything else. Pang Zhao also returned to his seat. Because this was the first time he had spoken with Qin Yining, his heart was still throbbing slightly. At this moment, Song Lan came in from the outside and bowed to everyone with a smile. Then she went to Qin Yining and whispered a few words in his ear. Qin Yining's expression didn't change. He nodded to indicate that he understood. Then he whispered a few words in Song Lan's ear and asked her to leave. Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan both saw it, but they didn't take it to heart. Fairy Lou chatted with Duchess Ding again. Most of their conversation was just about daily greetings and gossip. Qin Yining joined in the fun, but his attention was obviously not on their conversation. He always subconsciously glanced at the window lattice and the door. Pang Xiao lowered his eyes and didn't say anything, but his attention was on Qin Yining. Seeing her like this, he guessed that something must have happened. He couldn't help but smile with interest. He knew that Qin Yining was a smart woman, so he was looking forward to seeing what she was up to. Duchess Ding saw that it was almost time, so she said with a smile, "It's getting late." Qin Yining held Duchess Ding's shoulder and stopped her. She continued with a smile, "But the Abbey Dean and I hit it off very well. I can't help but want to talk for a while. You don't mind, do you?" Fairy Lu blinked her small eyes. Obviously, she didn't understand how she hit it off with this rich young lady. But she was a rich woman who had given her 4,000 taels of silver. In the future, Duchess Ding would live in the Fairy Lady Temple, and she would be able to get money from her. If there was money to be made, she would naturally do whatever she said. "Of course I don't mind. To be honest, I also hit it off with Miss Qin." "Yes. I think so. I feel close to the Abbey Dean. It can be seen that we are destined to meet each other." Qin Yining rolled her bright eyes and smiled. "Does the Abbey Dean live here for a long time? I just returned to the capital not long ago, and there are many things that I don't know." Duchess Ding felt Qin Yining's white hands pressing on her shoulders slightly. Although she didn't understand why she interrupted her farewell, she cooperated and said, "I remember that you have been in the Fairy Lady Temple for 4 or 5 years, right?" Fairy Lu nodded with a smile. "Yes, I do have a close relationship with the capital. But I have little talent and knowledge. There are many things that I can benefit from, but I haven't done much for the fated person. I'm really ashamed." Qin Yining hurriedly said, "The Abbey Dean is too modest. Not to mention other things, the Abbey Dean's ability to make irrefutable judgments is comparable to Tianjizi." When Qin Yining was wandering among the people, she had long heard that there was a wandering monk in the north of Dezhou. He was known as Tianjizi. Tianjizi specialized in reading the signs of heaven and breaking the world. A few years ago, he had read the fate of the Emperor of Dezhou and the 2 famous generals of Dezhou who had not yet ascended the throne. It was said that the Emperor of Zhou Li Qitian, Marquis Dingbei Jiziyu, and Prince Zhongshuan Pang Xiao became sworn brothers. They were the Iron Triangle who rebelled against the tyranny of Northern Ji. These 3 people occupied the 2 stars of 7 Kills and Army Destroyer in the Tianjizi. One of them was said to be unspeakably noble. Later, when Li Qitian ascended the throne, the unspeakably noble was naturally him. There was even a rumor among the people that Pang Xiao and Jiziyu were the reincarnations of 7 Kills and Army Destroyer respectively. Qin Yining used Tianjizi to compare to Fairy Lu. It could be said that he was praising her highly. Although Fairy Lu was smiling on the surface, she was muttering in her heart. Huzi, who was at the side, couldn't help but look at Fairy Lu. Pang Xiao raised her eyes and quietly looked at Qin Yining. Did she mean it or not? Did she say that because she knew Fairy Lu's true identity? Fairy Lu smiled and said, "Immeasurable deity. I don't dare to accept Miss Qin's praise. Besides, although I have a little bit of cleverness, I don't have the ability to get rid of disasters for everyone. What's the use of just saying it? Abbey Dean, you're too modest. It's better to nip the problem in the bud than to be unprepared." Qin Yining chatted with Fairy Lu about Taoism, where she used to live when she wasn't in the Fairy Lu Temple, and what the local customs were like. After chatting for a while, 2 hours passed unknowingly. Duchess Ding and the Sun clan were a little tired. Speaking of which, they had been sitting in Fairy Lu's room for 4 hours. Their backs were sore. Duchess Ding was about to leave again. But before she could open her mouth, Qin Yining stopped her with a smile. It's rare for me to be free today. What's the harm in chatting for a while? This time, everyone could clearly sense her abnormality. Chapter 88. In fact, Qin Yining was already very surprised that the Sun clan could keep their composure today and sit with them for 2 hours to listen to Qin Yining, Fairy Lu, and Duchess Ding chat. In the original plan, the first thing she considered was that the Sun clan was in a hurry to return home. After all, today was the day concubine Chao was brought into the house. Even if she wanted to show her disdain for concubine Chao as the mistress of the house, it was enough to leave her hanging for a while. Seeing that the Sun clan was angry, Qin Yining thought about the situation outside and decided that there was no harm in telling everyone now. Mother, don't be angry or anxious. The reason why I'm stalling for time is that I'm afraid that telling the truth will cause panic. Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Yining with interest. Duchess Ding and the Sun clan's faces changed nervously. Sister Yi, what's going on? Qin Yining's face became solemn. When we went up the mountain just now, I found some suspicious people. What? The Sun clan exclaimed, who are they? Duchess Ding held the Sun clan's hand and patted it. Don't be impatient. Listen to Sister Yi first. Qin Yining said, I've been living in the mountains since I was 8 years old. Because I live alone, I have to be vigilant against wild animals all year round. Therefore, I have developed a very keen sense. When someone looks at me with hostility, I feel my hair stand on end. When we went up the mountain just now, I had this feeling. When I looked around quietly, I found 2 men wearing de Zhou's military uniform hiding behind a withered tree in a low place beside the steps. I was worried that there were more than 2 of them. I was also afraid that if I shouted out, we women would be hurt. Therefore, I went up the mountain quietly. Speaking of this, Qin Yining comforted the worried Duchess Ding. I've already asked half of the guards who came with us to guard the side courtyard of my aunt. I left half of them to guard our current courtyard. However, I feel that aunt and the others are temporarily safe because if these people are really plotting something, anyone who has the intention of kidnapping or assassinating in the fairy temple is gathered in this room. Yes, the Abbey Dean, Duchess Ding, and Grand Preceptor Qin's wife and daughter were all in this room. Compared to the other Taoist nuns and womenfolk with low status, the most valuable ones to kidnap and assassinate were in this room. Duchess Ding and the Sun clan's hair stood on end. Qin Yining only saw 2 of them, but how many of them were there? Moreover, these people were wearing de Zhou's military uniforms. It was too strange. Sister Yi, are you sure you're not mistaken? This is the capital of the Dayan. No matter how bad it is, they shouldn't let people wearing de Zhou's military uniforms walk around the streets, right? The Sun clan's voice was slightly shrill because of nervousness. Qin Yining hurriedly signaled the Sun clan to lower their voice and said, regardless of whether they are real people from de Zhou or not, and regardless of when they changed into de Zhou's military uniforms, the important thing is that they came with bad intentions. Duchess Ding's mind had already turned countless twists and turns. Her first guess was that these people were sent by the incapable ruler. Perhaps the incapable ruler had arranged for people to wear de Zhou's military uniforms and kill the remaining womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion to vent his anger. Then, he would clear his name. Although it seemed absurd, a self-indulgent ruler was capable of doing such absurd things. The room was silent. The Sun clan trembled with fear. What should we do? What should we do? Mother, what should we do? Duchess Ding frowned unhappily. The Sun clan's panic was in sharp contrast to Qin Yining's calmness after knowing about it. Can't you be quiet? Isn't everyone here? Fairy Lu also persuaded, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. My room is quite sturdy. It will be fine for a while. Pang Xiao withdrew her cold and disdainful gaze from the Sun Clan and looked at Qin Yining calmly. While admiring her wit and pitying her situation, she had already guessed it in her heart. Since Qin Yining had found it when he went up the mountain, given the distance between Fairy Taoist Temple and Jingdu, 4 hours was enough for the reinforcements to come at full speed. Although not everyone could recognize his appearance, what if some of the people Qin Yining found recognized him? There would be more trouble then. The reinforcements would definitely be able to protect the safety of these women because Qin Yining was a smart person and would not put her grandmother and mother in danger. What's more, her little niece, who had just been born, was in the side yard. Thinking of this, Pang Xiao stood up with a pale face and a trembling voice. Why didn't you say so earlier? What are you thinking? Aren't you trying to harm me? He showed off his fear of death vividly. He paced around the ground like an ant on a hot pan. No, we're leaving now. You guys take care of yourselves. After saying that, he pulled Huzi and left. Huzi was stunned by Pang Xiao. Wasn't his Wang Yi interested in Miss Qin? At this time, shouldn't he step forward bravely and make a manly promise, I will definitely protect you, to move Miss Qin? Wang Yi, you just ran away like this. Aren't you afraid of leaving a bad impression? Huzi chased after Pang Xiao with a confused face. Qin Yining narrowed his eyes and chuckled. His laughter was particularly clear in the room. Young Master Yao. Don't you think your behavior is very suspicious? Pang Xiao stopped in his tracks and looked at him with admiration. When he turned back, he still looked like he was about to pee his pants. What, you nobles have provoked bad people. Are you not allowing people to escape? I don't have time to waste with you. My family has only one son for 3 generations. Do you still want me to stay and protect you? Let me tell you, that's impossible. I advise you to quickly run for your lives too. Young Master Yao, don't joke around. Qin Yining stared at Pang Xiao with her beautiful eyes. The sharp coldness in her bright and beautiful eyes could not be ignored. Although her body was still delicate and soft, her aura did not lose to any adult man. Pang Xiao was almost dazzled by her eyes. Young Master Yao, as long as you are a normal person, you would know that it is more dangerous outside than inside, right? I only saw 2 suspicious people. Normal people would think that the other party would have many people surrounding the Immortal Lady Temple. Even if you can fly, I'm afraid you can't escape. Unless you brought those people here and you are in a hurry to meet them. Or are you worried that you will reveal your true colors in front of the reinforcements I invited? With every sentence Qin Yining said, she took a step forward until Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan were behind her. Her eyes flashed with a kind of light, like a little beast that did not admit defeat. Even if she was weak, she had to stand up and face the enemy head-on. Pang Xiao's heart beat wildly when he saw this. He almost couldn't resist the desire to directly tie her back and tame her. Seeing that Pang Xiao didn't speak, Qin Yining became even more nervous. She pulled Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan to the door. Because Fairy Lu called Pang Xiao master, she couldn't completely trust Fairy Lu now. As she walked, Qin Yining shouted, "Guards!" As soon as her voice fell, there was a bang in front of the door. 4 tall guards rushed in with sticks in their hands, protecting Qin Yining, the Sun Clan, and Duchess Ding behind them. Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu also rushed in and stood in front of their master. Qin Yining was standing very close to the door, which was the most convenient place to escape. Fairy Lu saw that, slapped her thigh and shouted, "Immeasurable Lord! My mahogany table! Also, my door curtain is adorned with the highest quality green jade. Ah! What are you doing? Get out!" At this point, Pang Xiao no longer had the heart to pretend. In front of Qin Yining, he dropped all his acting for the first time. He wasn't an elegant young master, nor was he a knowledgeable rich businessman, nor was he a coward. His slightly hunched back was straightened, and his domineering aura was so strong that it almost suffocated people. His slender eyebrows gave people a sense of sharpness, and his upturned eyes seemed to be able to shoot ice arrows. There was a playful and domineering smile at the corner of his mouth, and he was sizing up Qin Yining without hiding it. Qin Yining's mind reacted with all kinds of nervous signals that only appeared when danger was approaching. It was as if he was facing a tiger or a cheetah. He said in a trembling voice, "It's really you. Who the hell are you? Who am I? Why should I tell you who I am? You. If I want to deal with you, I have thousands of ways. Do I need to do something so embarrassing? Little girl, it's a good thing to be smart, but don't take it for granted." Qin Yining's mind raced, and he secretly estimated whether the 4 guards could beat him and his entourage. This person looks so imposing. Is he a martial artist or not? Unexpectedly, when he was hesitating, he suddenly heard crying and screaming in front of the courtyard door, and then there was the sound of fighting and killing that made people tremble. Qin Yining thought that the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities had come. Unexpectedly, when he looked outside, he saw a group of men wearing de Zhou's military uniform rushing in with big knives in their hands. They cut down people in sight without mercy. "Oh my God!" The Sun Clan shouted in fear. "No, we can't be trapped in the room." The people in the room couldn't be trusted, and there were so many enemies. Were they going to be caught like turtles in a jar? Qin Yining pulled the Sun Clan and Duchess Ding, called the 4 guards, and ran out, wanting to escape from the side door. Unexpectedly, as soon as he went out, he heard a sharp sound in the air. Qin Yining only felt an unprecedented crisis, and the hair on her back stood up. She subconsciously wanted to hide, but in the next moment, she remembered that the person behind her was her mother. If she hid, what would happen to the person behind her? It was at this moment of hesitation that the men in de Zhou's military uniform rushed over with bloody knives. She also saw the 2 archers shooting arrows on the courtyard wall. It was too late. Qin Yining was so scared that she closed her eyes tightly. She was afraid that she would die here today. Unexpectedly, she heard a strong wind and saw a shadow in front of her, blocking the sunlight. Her hand was held by a rough and warm hand. Chapter 89. Everything in front of Qin Yining's eyes seemed to be moving in slow motion. Her hand that was held by him felt a steady stream of heat in the winter. She was pulled behind him and hidden behind him. Qin Yining could only see his tall figure in front of her. With his own strength, he isolated all the bloody scenes so that she could only see his back. She couldn't see his face or his extremely fast movements. She could only see the cold light slashing at him again and again, but he used clever and tricky methods to resolve it. He really wasn't a businessman. How could an ordinary businessman have such fierce and handsome martial arts? How could he be so calm and awe-inspiring in the face of danger? Who was he? These assassins showed no mercy to him. Every strike was fatal. They wanted to kill all of them in one fell swoop. If he hadn't blocked in front of her, the guards she brought wouldn't have been a match for them. They might have all died. Qin Yining knew that she had misunderstood him. Even if his identity was a mystery, he wasn't in cahoots with the assassins. Qin Yining protected Duchess Ding and the Sun Clan and wanted to retreat into the house, but the assassins had obviously thought of this and blocked the way. Qin Yining could only take a step back and protect them as they retreated to the corner of the wall. Pang Xiao and the 4 guards stood in front of the womenfolk, but he alone had to block more than 20 men, whose martial arts skill was not weak. He also had to divert his attention to evade the arrows, and he also had to consider the angle of the arrows. If by any chance he was able to evade, he was afraid that she would be injured behind him. Even if his martial arts were excellent, he was afraid that he would lose sight of her. "Who's he?" Pang Xiao immediately shouted and glanced at the wall. Huzi immediately understood and gave up protecting the women. He picked up the steel knife he picked up and broke out of the encirclement, trying to take down the two archers. Moreover, Pang Xiao had already ascertained the origin of these assassins. At first, he guessed that Emperor Zhou wanted to kill him, so he investigated his whereabouts and wanted to kill him into Zhou's territory. He had his own people wear his military uniform to do the job, so no one would suspect that it was arranged by the people of Dezhou. But when he really fought with them, he discovered that these people's martial arts style was actually the same as the Taitan people who invaded the northern part of Dezhou all year round. Even though these people were dressed like Dezhou, it was hard for him to ignore their tall stature and the smell that only came from living on the grasslands all year round. The Taitan Khan was extremely cunning. He knew that Dezhou was at war with Dian, and the Tiger Army was rushing to the south of Dezhou. They would definitely increase their attacks on the north of Dezhou. Ji Ziyu was probably using all his strength to resist the Taitan's invasion and buy time for him to recover Dian. He just didn't expect that these Taitan barbarians would not hesitate to cross Dezhou's border and go deep into Dian's capital in the south to carry out an assassination. Wearing Dezhou's military uniform to do the job, this was a clever tactic to use to confuse people. Pang Xiao's mind was racing, but in reality, only a moment had passed. At this time, Huzi had already killed his way to the wall. He jumped up and swung his knife at an archer. The other archer saw that his comrade was being attacked, but didn't try to help or escape. He seized the opportunity to kill a few people. Seeing that his arrows couldn't hurt Pang Xiao, he aimed at the women who were huddled in the corner and protected. He fired 3 arrows in succession and wanted to move again, but Huzi had already attacked him, forcing him to jump down the wall. As for Qin Yining, when he saw the cold light whistling over again, he only had time to turn around and hug the Sun clan behind him. The Sun clan had already been scared to tears. When she saw the cold light shooting over again, she thought that she was done for, but Qin Yining hugged her tightly and stood in front of her and Duchess Ding. The Sun clan was moved and frightened. She pushed Qin Yining and shouted wildly. Duchess Ding's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. She shouted, "Sister Yi." Pang Xiao saw the 3 cold lights shooting over. At this critical moment, he used all his strength to twist the neck of the assassin in front of him and rushed toward Qin Yining. The arrows were extremely fast. He brandished his sword to cut them, but he could only block 2 of them. He couldn't block the remaining one no matter what. At this moment, he didn't have time to think and could only stretch out his arm to block it. Qin Yining only heard the sound of weapons colliding and arrows falling behind him, followed by the muffled sound of a sharp weapon piercing into flesh. Qin Yining looked back in panic and saw the tall man's back. However, the right side of his body was dyed red with blood. The sharp tip of the arrow had pierced through his shoulder and came out from under his shoulder blade. Qin Yining gasped and couldn't help exclaiming, "Young Master Yao." She knew that he had saved her again. Pang Xiao looked back at her quickly. He was still in the mood to raise his eyebrows and smile. Without hesitation, he broke the arrow that had pierced through his shoulder and threw it to the ground. Then, he began to fight the assassin again. Blood spilled and dyed half of his clothes red. Qin Yining only looked at him and felt pain for him. However, somewhere in his heart, there was an inexplicable tremor. Qin Yining blinked in panic and shook his head vigorously. He wanted to get rid of that incomparably handsome and wild smile from his mind. Sun clan member hugged Qin Yining and burst into tears. "Sister Yi, are you okay? Are you okay? You scared me to death." Qin Yining came back to his senses and quickly patted Sun clan member's back to comfort her. Then, he smiled comfortingly at Duchess Ding, who looked nervous and concerned. Duchess Ding nodded with tears in her eyes. More than half of the assassins were killed by Pang Xiao and Huzi. At this moment, another loud roar came from outside. This time, it was the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities that Qin Yining had sent someone to invite. There were only 6 assassins left, and all of them were injured. They were surrounded by the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities. They looked at each other and their bodies shook. Black blood dripped from the corners of their mouths. Then, they fell to the ground with a plop. Pang Xiao covered his shoulder and sneered. They were all Taiden's men of sacrifice. Although they didn't kill him and didn't kill all the important people, they were wearing De Zhou's military uniform and caused misunderstanding and discord between De Zhou and Dian. Huzi rushed to Pang Xiao. First, he lifted his clothes and looked at the arrow wound. Then, he glared fiercely at Qin Yining. Femme fatale, she was a big disaster. Master, are you okay? Pang Xiao shook his head. I'm fine. He moved his bloody shoulder. Yes. It didn't hurt the muscles and bones. It just pierced through the flesh. But Master has lost a lot of blood. At this time, there was a sound of footsteps in front of the courtyard. A man in a black military uniform respectfully led a tall middle-aged man with a beautiful beard into the courtyard. It was Su Mao, the commander of the 5 cities warden's office of the East City, who led Qin Huayuan in. Qin Huayuan was panting. He first looked at the miserable situation in the courtyard. Then, his eyes fell on Qin Yining and the Sun clan. Seeing that they were safe and sound, he finally let out a sigh of relief. His pale face improved a little. When Huzi saw Qin Huayuan, he clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 90. Seeing that Qin Huayuan had come, Qin Yining breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, as if he had found his backbone in an instant. Sun Clan quickly walked up to Qin Huayuan with tears streaming down her face. She hugged Qin Huayuan's arm and sobbed like an aggrieved child. Master, you're here. Well, I rushed here as soon as I received Lord Su's message. Are you all right? Qin Huayuan straightened Madame Sun's crooked cloak and turned to nod at Duchess Ding. Then, he looked at Qin Yining and saw that her hair was a little messy. Although there were a few bloodstains on her body, she was not injured. Qin Huayuan was completely relieved. Sun Clan sobbed and said, Fortunately, Sister Yi and young Master Yao protected us. If it weren't for young Master Yao's help, I'm afraid we would have been. Qin Huayuan followed Sun Clan's gaze and looked at the young man who had been shot in the shoulder and half of his body was stained with blood. This young man was in his early 20s. He was tall and handsome, with slanted eyebrows and deep phoenix eyes. He was an unfathomable person. Young Master Yao, thank you for saving us. Qin Huayuan cupped his hands and saluted. Pang Xiao's left hand, which was hidden behind his back, clenched and loosened. He smiled faintly with a pale face. You're welcome. Young Master Yao, you have an extraordinary bearing and superb martial arts skills. It's really admirable that you were able to withstand the attack of more than 20 assassins with only my daughter's 4 guards. Qin Huayuan smiled elegantly. He was sincerely grateful, but he still had his doubts. Pang Xiao had already regained his scholarly appearance. He covered his wound with his hand, and said with a pale face, I'm Pang Xiang. I was apprenticed to a master when I was a child. Fortunately, my bodyguard is skilled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it alone. Hearing this, Huzi immediately shook his head with a simple and honest smile. No. Young master's martial arts skills are also good. Qin Huayuan sized up Huzi again. He saw that Huzi's face was young and tender, his head was strong, but his eyes were very shrewd. Huzi's acupoints were bulging, and his body was sturdy. At first glance, he could tell that Huzi was a martial artist. Then he looked at this handsome young master. Although he was also tall, his temperament was very scholarly. No wonder he was suspicious. This person appeared in Fairy Temple and saved the lives of his wife and daughter. He had to find out. Qin Huayuan's beautiful lips. Seeing that their conversation had ended, she asked worriedly, "Are the womenfolk in the side courtyard all right?" Duchess Ding also looked nervously. Qin Huayuan turned to look at Su Mao. Su Mao said, "Don't worry, Grand Preceptor. I've already checked. The womenfolk in the side courtyard are all right. The assassins didn't go there. However, 3 of the nuns in Fairy Temple died and 2 of the sedan bearers in front of the mountain gate died. Judging from the position of the dead bodies, this group of assassins came straight to this courtyard." As Su Mao spoke, he looked suspiciously at Duchess Ding and then at Fairy Lu. Duchess Ding was very calm, but she didn't look well. Fairy Lu was still in shock. She was murmuring with her eyes closed. Obviously, she was scared. Su Mao's suspicious eyes finally fell on Pang Xiao and Huzi. Pang Xiao frowned slightly and covered his shoulder. Huzi scolded in his heart. After scolding Qin Huayuan for being ungrateful, he scolded the Dian for not having a good official. Finally, he scolded Qin Yining for being a femme fatale. They could have left long ago. Why did they have to get involved in this? It's all this femme fatale's fault. Qin Yining saw Su Mao's eyes and frowned worriedly. She was sure that this person's background was not simple, but he saved her, her mother, and her grandmother's lives today. If he hadn't sacrificed himself to block the arrow for her, she would have been dead. She had always been a person who would repay kindness. Moreover, she had only met this young Master Yao twice, so it was understandable that he was unwilling to tell her the truth about his identity. She couldn't erase the fact that he had saved her life just because he wanted to keep his identity a secret. Qin Yining didn't have a good impression of the Dian officials and hated the corrupt Yan dynasty. Of course, she wouldn't help these people to deal with her savior. She quickly calculated in her mind, trying to think of a countermeasure. Pang Zhao's depressed mood suddenly improved when he saw Qin Yining worried about him. He was very observant. Even if he didn't stare at Qin Yining, he could clearly see her frowning and narrowing eyes. How could she be so cute? He couldn't help but want to snatch her back and keep her by his side. This girl was as beautiful as a painting. It would be good to look at her every day. However, Qin Huayuan couldn't escape the responsibility of Pang Zhongjing's death. In terms of morality, Pang Xiao understood that he couldn't blame Qin Huayuan for this. First, he had to blame the incapable ruler of Northern Ji for his conjecture. Second, they had different standpoints. Qin Huayuan was a citizen of Yan. It was normal for him to deal with the invaders. However, in terms of personal feelings, he still felt awkward when he saw Qin Huayuan. Why was such an interesting girl Qin Huayuan's daughter? Just as the two were thinking about this, Qin Huayuan pulled the Sun Clan's hand and called Qin Yining over. He turned to Su Mao and said, "Since that's the case, this official will take my family back first." Unexpectedly, Su Mao strode forward and blocked Qin Huayuan's path. He cupped his hands politely and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin, please wait. Grand Preceptor Qin's family is also a witness to today's matter. This official wants to keep them for questioning." Qin Huayuan said unhappily, "There are also Guzi from Fairy Temple and other people here. There are so many people here. Isn't it enough for official Su to interrogate?" Su Mao still had a smile on his face. He bowed respectfully to Qin Huayuan. However, his tone and attitude were very firm. "Please forgive me, Grand Preceptor Qin. This official is just doing his duty." You are the role model of the officials in the imperial court. You won't refuse this official's reasonable request, right? If this spreads, it will be bad for your reputation. Qin Huayuan's expression was gloomy. He frowned and looked at Su Mao. Su Mao still had a smile on his face. However, he didn't back down and stood in front of Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining saw everything clearly and understood what was going on. This official Su was not on the same side as his father. He was most likely one of Chao Guizhang's henchmen. Chao Guizhang's connections in the imperial court were complicated. After many years of management, he had his confidants in all the ministries. Although his father was powerful, he was not as powerful as Chao Guizhang, who had the support of the empress in the palace. Qin Yining didn't want his father to have a conflict with Chao Guizhang's faction because of this matter. Even if he didn't go against Chao Guizhang, it wouldn't be good to make anyone his enemy. Moreover, she wanted to protect her savior. If she stepped forward, this person's identity would be more believable. Even if she suspected him, helping him cover up like this could be considered as paying him back. Qin Yining came forward and bowed. "Father, why don't you take mother back first? There are things at home that you need to do. I will stay here and explain things to official Su. After a while, I will return to the manor." Qin Huayuan frowned. "You are a girl. Showing your face in public is inappropriate." Qin Yining said, "Father also knows that I am different from ordinary girls. Moreover, I am not alone. Grandmother is here. My business friends and guards are all here." "Business friends?" Qin Huayuan raised his eyebrows in confusion. Qin Yining said, "Yes, it is young Master Yao. Father also knows that I have other businesses under my Zhao Yun agency." Qin Huayuan frowned again and looked at Pang Xiao. He wanted to ask more, but he knew that this was not the time to talk. Who knew how many spies from all walks of life were gathered here? Thinking of this, Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "Be careful." The family still had to carry Madame Chao into the family. He wanted to stay, but the matter over there was more important. They had already wasted so much time. If the matter was blown out of proportion, his plan would change. Moreover, he asked Qin Yining to stay and cooperate with the questioning in front of Su Mao. Su Mao didn't dare to touch her in the slightest. Qin Huayuan pulled the Sun Clan's hand and quickly walked away. The Sun Clan's hand was held by Qin Huayuan. They almost forgot about the grievances of taking in a concubine. They even forgot to say goodbye to their mother. Just like that, they happily followed him and left the fairy temple. While Su Mao brought people to investigate the courtyard, Qin Yining ordered Bing Tang and Qiu Lu, "You two go in first and help young Master Yao look at his injuries." He said, "You too," but his eyes were looking at Bing Tang. Bing Tang nodded solemnly. "Miss, don't worry. I will go now." Qin Yining said to Pang Xiao, "Young master, don't worry. My servant girl knows some medical skills. Let her bandage young master's wounds to stop the bleeding. Later, we will invite a doctor to take a look." Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining with a smile that wasn't a smile. She didn't nod or refuse. Under his gaze, Qin Yining felt her heart beat faster. Even the hand he had just held was a bit hot. She lowered her long eyelashes in panic. Only then did Pang Xiao let her go. He smiled and said, "Thank you for your trouble, Mississippi." Fairy Lu hurriedly led everyone into the house. "Let's do it here. This poor Daoist still has some medicinal herbs that can be used." Pang Xiao and Huzi followed Bing Tang and Qiu Lu into the house. Qin Yining brought along Song Lan to answer some of Su Mao's questions. Su Mao only asked about what had happened today. How did Qin Yining find out? How did he send someone to report it? Qin Yining avoided the important and dwelling on the trivial. The more he talked with Su Mao, the more he didn't like this person. This person looked like a friendly and intelligent person, but he was actually very conceited. Sometimes, before Qin Yining could finish speaking, he would be interrupted by him saying things like, I know, or okay, I understand. In the end, Qin Yining simply didn't say anything more. This person had made his own decision. What else could she say? Su Mao crossed his arms and asked again, that young Master Yao, is he your friend? Yes, young Master Yao and I have some business dealings. Business? Su Mao's tone was somewhat disdainful. Miss Qin is a powerful person. Qin Yining naturally saw his disdain. He smiled and said, Sir, you must be joking. I'm just a girl in the boudoir. How powerful can I be? Her ambiguous words reminded Su Mao of the person behind the girl in front of him. She was Qin Huayuan's daughter, the granddaughter of Duke Ding. Although Duke Ding's mansion had fallen, the old officials of Duke Ding's faction were still there. Qin Huayuan was now flourishing. He really couldn't defend this girl. Su Mao ignored Qin Yining and began to point at the corpses on the ground to solve the case. I've looked carefully. These people came to assassinate on Dian, but they wore de Zhou's military uniform. Do they think the warden's office of the 5 cities is weak? I don't think they're from de Zhou. Someone immediately agreed flatteringly, yes, sir, you're right. Chapter 91. Qin Yining looked at Su Mao's satisfied smile and frowned slightly. It seemed that this person was not only conceited, but also very arbitrary and ignorant. Although Qin Yining had some guesses and ideas about the origins of these people, he was not willing to say a word in front of Su Mao. Su Mao had heard enough of his subordinate's flattery and suddenly put away his smug expression. He scolded coldly, rice buckets. Qin Yining was startled by his sudden shout. The subordinates around Su Mao were stunned by the roar. Su Mao snorted, you bunch of rice buckets, I was just deliberately tricking you, and you all took it seriously. I was just being sarcastic. Can't you all use your brains? Everyone hurriedly smiled apologetically, yes, sir, you're right. Sir, please give us some advice. Su Mao pointed at the corpses on the ground and said, these people were wearing de Zhou's military uniforms. They wanted to give us the impression that de Zhou people would not brazenly wear de Zhou's military uniforms to assassinate people. However, I concluded that these people must be de Zhou's assassins. They used a smokescreen to interfere with our judgment. I see. Sir is indeed knowledgeable. Everyone echoed and praised like a tide. It was almost impossible to hear what they were praising. In Qin Yining's eyes, everyone's flattering faces were really stupid. Su Mao felt that this scene was quite useful. He laughed and said, then, we can close the case. These are all de Zhou spies. They actually dared to assassinate Duchess Ding and Grand Preceptor Qin's wife and daughter. Yes, they must have been sent by that bastard Peng Zhishi from Xihua City. Yes. It must be so. Sir, you solved the case with lightning speed. We admire you. The warden's office of the 5 cities is also fortunate to have Sir Su in charge. Yes, otherwise we wouldn't know what to do. Qin Yining really couldn't stand these people's flattering faces. The reason why Dian's court was corrupt was because it was gnawed away by this group of vermin. Qin Yining said, Sir, since you have closed the case, I won't disturb you anymore. Su Mao seemed to have just remembered that there was someone beside him and immediately waved his hand indifferently. Qin Yining asked Song Lan to send Duchess Ding back to the side courtyard and went into the room. He lowered the warm curtain and closed the door. The smell of blood's blood. He looked at the man's snow-white, blood-stained undergarments, his right arm, and his right arm's arm. A broken arrow had been taken out, and the water in the wooden basin that was steaming white steam was red. Bing Tang tied his sleeves with a bandage. His arms were also stained with blood, and his body was even more so. At this time, she was frowning and stitching the wound layer by layer. Qin Yining felt pain for him, but this person didn't even frown, as if the wound wasn't on his body. Thinking that if it weren't for his help, this bloody hole would have been on her body and she would have lost her life, she felt grateful and guilty to this mysterious young master. Bing Tang, is young Master Yao's injury okay? Bing Tang didn't answer immediately. She first stitched the last 2 stitches, then frowned and said, the penetrating wound didn't hurt the muscles and bones, so it won't be a problem if he recuperates well. It's just that young Master Yao lost too much blood, and the arrow was smeared with poison. What? Qin Yining was shocked. What kind of poison is it? Is it serious? Huzi also said anxiously, what should we do? Is there an antidote for this poison? He knew that Qin Yining was a big disaster. His master was at odds with Qin Yining. Her father harmed his master's father, and now she harmed him. Pang Xiao said indifferently, I don't feel anything, just a little dizzy. Isn't it because of the blood loss? Bing Tang said, this poison is a kind of poison that paralyzes the brain. If it isn't cured, it will paralyze the person for a long time. It seems that the assassin used this poison because they thought that if the assassination failed, even if it couldn't kill the person immediately, it would take away the person's mobility. Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows, and secretly sneered at the Taitan people's tricks. If it was so troublesome and insidious, it would be better to directly poison him with crane's head red and peacock's gallbladder. Could it be that they wanted to enjoy his miserable death after being paralyzed? Qin Yining frowned with worry. Bing Tang, is there an antidote for this poison? Whatever medicine you want, no matter how much it costs, we'll use it. I'll ask someone to do it immediately. Huzi glared at Qin Yining, at least he said something reasonable. Pang Xiao smiled and looked at her with bright eyes. His deep eyes seemed to be able to speak, as if he was asking Qin Yining, now you don't suspect that I'm in cahoots with the assassin. Qin Yining understood. His face was a little hot, and he blushed and looked away. Bing Tang had applied medicine and bandaged Pang Xiao properly, and said, this poison needs a kind of tricky acupuncture and medicine to detoxify. The antidote is easy to get, but it's a pity that this acupuncture has been lost. This sentence was tantamount to a terrible nightmare for Huzi. He choked on the spot and held Pang Xiao's uninjured hand. Master, what should we do? Master, why are you so stupid? I wish I could take your place. Master, you can't die. Madam Dowager and Madam Dowager are waiting for you to come home. Qin Yining was also sad when Huzi cried. Even if she had doubts about this person, she didn't want him to die. If he died to save her, she would feel guilty for the rest of her life. Qin Yining's eyes were red, but he was still calm. Don't worry, don't worry. I'll find a way to cure you, no matter how long it takes or how much money it costs. I'll definitely cure you. If you're really paralyzed in the end, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. Huzi's teary eyes were wide open. Fairy Lu glanced at Pang Xiao with a smile, and then looked at Qin Yining. Pang Xiao's phoenix-like eyes suddenly lit up. Are you serious? Of course. Qin Yining's eyes were firm. Pang Xiao immediately burst into laughter. When he laughed, it was as if a spring flower had just bloomed. His originally oppressive aura was completely restrained, and his handsome facial features also softened. This made Qin Yining's heart beat rapidly, and she hurriedly lowered her long eyelashes to avoid looking at him. Bing Tang said helplessly, I haven't finished speaking yet. Why didn't you ask me? What? Everyone looked at Bing Tang. Bing Tang pointed at his small nose and snorted, unfortunately, I happen to know that set of acupuncture. Oh my. You little girl, you're deliberately making fun of me. Huzi wiped the tears on her face and stared at Bing Tang with her eyes wide open. Bing Tang snorted, "It's your own fault for crying so much. Are you still a man? You stinky girl. Little bean. Potato spirit. Who are you calling a potato spirit?" Bing Tang was so angry that her apple face turned red. She put her hands on her hips and stared at Huzi. She was small and short, and she hated it when others poked at her sore spot. Chapter 92. Take responsibility for him. What kind of nonsense was that? Qin Yining's face instantly turned crimson from his words. She glared at him with her large, watery eyes. "Young master was injured to save me, so of course I will take responsibility." "Miss, why are you in such a hurry to explain? I didn't ask you to take responsibility for anything else. I just said that I'm not the one who will serve someone for the rest of their life." Pang Xiao was overwhelmed by her glare and couldn't help but want to tease her. Qin Yining's face turned even redder. She really found this person annoying. From the time they met until now, he had already changed his appearance too many times. Even if it was the same face, he had the ability to display different auras. Qin Yining didn't even know which one was his true face. Thinking of his profound martial arts, Qin Yining felt that this person was unfathomable. However, even if he was an unfathomable person, his mouth was still too annoying. Qin Yining glared at him again. Pang Xiao held back his laughter and held his shoulder as he painfully said, "You really treat my kindness as malice. I saved someone's life, but I'm being disdained in every possible way. You just said that if I became paralyzed, you would serve me for the rest of my life. I'm not paralyzed yet, but you're already giving me that attitude. It's obvious that you weren't sincere just now. You were deliberately trying to coax me." Qin Yining really wanted to leave him alone. He was in such good spirits and had such a bad mouth. It was obvious that he was fine. Bing Tang also snorted. He secretly thought that the master and servant were birds of a feather and spoke the same way. On the other hand, Huzi was shocked by Pang Xiao's appearance. After following his master for so many years, Huzi had seen him many times. There were those who pretended to be rough and threw tantrums, those who were cold and distant, those who were arrogant and domineering, those who had a strong scholarly air, those who were greedy and afraid of death, and those who only cared about money. No matter which side it was, Pang Xiao could wear a different mask and change his aura. He could perfectly act out those appearances and achieve his goal. However, he had never seen his master flirt with a woman from a good family before. Ever since he met this Miss Qin, he had learned a lot. Last time, he had snatched her hairpin and touched her face. Not only that, he had even gone to kill her father. He had peeked at her, and after peeking at her, he had giggled foolishly. Now, he was actually pretending to be pitiful. Was this still his master who was decisive in killing, had a godlike art of war, and was treacherous in his schemes? Bing Tang prepared the silver needles in a huff. Then, he swiftly inserted the needles into Pang Xiao's body. Pang Xiao said, "How long will it take for my injuries to heal? How long does acupuncture and medication take?" "The decoction will take half a month. Acupuncture is a little more troublesome. It requires daily acupuncture, which will also take half a month." Pang Xiao nodded and looked at Qin Yining seriously. "In that case, lend me your maidservant for half a month." Qin Yining frowned and shook his head without hesitation. "That won't do." Bing Tang was different from ordinary maidservants. If he left her side, he was afraid that he would be framed by the demon empress. It was better to keep her under his watch. Pang Xiao frowned again, feeling wronged. How cruel. It seems that women's words can't be trusted. Just now, you said that if I became paralyzed, you would serve me for the rest of my life. Now, you won't even lend me a maidservant who knows medicine. You. Qin Yining was so angry that his face turned red. He bit his lip and said, "Don't worry. Even though I've delayed your time, I'll waive all your expenses at the Cloud stepping in. I'll even send someone to bring Bing Tang to treat your injuries every day until you recover. What do you think?" Pang Xiao's eyes were full of smiles. He pretended to hesitate and said, "This can be considered a solution. However, the Cloud stepping in's expenses aren't that expensive. How can I take advantage of you?" "Don't worry. That inn is my property. Moreover, you were injured because of me. I should take responsibility." "Oh." Pang Xiao dragged out his voice. "Since Miss wants to take responsibility, then I can only take advantage of you." Qin Yining blinked his long eyelashes. He was stunned for a moment before he understood the double meaning of his words. He was so angry that he wanted to kick him. Pang Xiao didn't seem like an injured person at all. He actually laughed heartily. Bing Tang poked him with a silver needle. "Don't move. Young master, aren't you afraid that your wound will split open again? Was this person made of iron? Did he not feel pain at all?" Pang Xiao was in a good mood and began to bargain again. "I was injured because of you. You're only sending a maidservant back and forth to treat me with acupuncture. Isn't that too perfunctory? Isn't that also waiving your expenses at the Cloud stepping in?" Qin Yining vaguely guessed what he wanted to say. "How is that the same? I don't lack money for food and lodging. If you're willing to come and see me every day and serve me tea, I'll pay you double the amount of money for food and lodging. Is that okay? Do you think I'm lacking money?" Qin Yining's face suddenly burned. If she wasn't worried that his injuries would worsen and he would die from blood loss, she really wanted to give him a few punches. With this thought, Qin Yining was shocked. Although she was young, she had experienced many things. It had become a habit for her to be steady when dealing with matters. There were very few people who had the ability to provoke her to this point. This kind of anger wasn't the kind that could be used to provoke Qin Huaining. This kind of anger couldn't be used to gain victory through scheming. It was purely to vent her anger by punching this fella with a cheap mouth. At this time, Bing Tang had already removed the needles and was beginning to clean up. Qin Yining felt that if she stayed any longer, she would be teased by his words. She immediately called Qiu Lu to order someone to prepare a carriage. She then asked, "Young master, do you want to stay here for the time being, or should I have someone send you to the Cloud stepping in?" "Naturally, you'll have to personally send me there." Did she say that she would personally send him there? Qin Yining pursed his lips and finally sighed helplessly. He said, "All right, then we'll leave in a bit." He then turned to Fairy Lu and said politely, "I'll have to trouble the abbess to take care of my grandmother." "Immeasurable deity. This humble Taoist will take care of it. Today, I've caused trouble for the abbess. Although the military office of the 5 cities has intervened, if the abbess has any trouble, you can come to the Qin Manor and send me a message." After all, because of this assassination, not only did they lose 2 sedan bearers, but they also lost 3 ants. The families of the sedan bearers naturally needed to be compensated. These 3 ants were also innocent people. Qin Yining felt guilty. Fairy Lu opened her mouth. She originally wanted to take the opportunity to ask for more money, but when she saw Pang Xiao looking at her with a smile that wasn't a smile, she swallowed her words back into her stomach. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you, Miss Qin. This humble Taoist understands." Qin Yining said, "Young master, please get ready. I'll go to the side yard and come back later." Without waiting for Pang Xiao to speak, he quickly walked out with Bing Tang. The yard had been cleaned up, but the faint smell of blood in the air destroyed the quietness of this place. The sky was dark and lead-gray clouds hung overhead as if it would snow at any time. Qin Yining didn't dare to think about the terrifying assassination that he had experienced today. He quickly went to the side yard where the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion lived. When he saw Duchess Ding, he pulled her aside and took out a banknote of 1,000 taels of silver from his sleeve. He secretly gave it to her. "Grandmother, this 1,000 taels of silver can be cashed out immediately. You live here with your family, so you have to spend money on food, accommodation, and other necessities. Don't make yourself suffer." Duchess Ding saw the sincerity in Qin Yining's eyes. He didn't get angry at being alienated from her after she recovered. She couldn't help but feel gratified and sad. She sighed and patted the back of Qin Yining's hand, saying, "Grandmother, I won't be polite with you. I'll take the money. When you go back this time, you must take care of your mother. Although your mother sometimes makes mistakes, her sincerity to your father is undeniable. Before you came back, your father took concubines. Every time he took a concubine, she would make a fuss for a long time. This time, the concubine was appointed by the emperor, and her background is so extraordinary. You must be careful." "I know." Qin Yining nodded solemnly and said, "Grandmother, don't worry. I will do my best to protect my mother and take good care of myself. You are a smart and sensible child. Grandmother knows that you have a sense of propriety." Duchess Ding reminded Qin Yining again and then sent her out. Qin Yining looked back at the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion, and her heart ached. In this world, the most unpredictable thing was fate. Who would have thought that such a big duke's mansion would collapse overnight? Who would have thought that a family would be separated forever in the blink of an eye? These people might quarrel with each other, and there might be small misunderstandings between brothers and sisters. She thought that her life was still long. Quarreling would naturally make up, and misunderstandings would naturally be solved. Who would have thought that some regrets would be left behind forever? No one could be sure which would come first, disaster or tomorrow. Qin Yining took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. No matter what, she had to take every step carefully and try her best. She would never let herself have any regrets. When they arrived at the mountain gate, Qin Yining saw a warm sedan going down the mountain. Qin Yining didn't want to sit in the sedan, so she walked with Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, and Song Lan. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, the two groups got into their respective carriages. Qin Yining sent them to the clouds, stepping in first. When they first arrived, Master Zhong just sent them here and left first. He heard that the 5 cities warden's office had solved a big case of assassination in De Zhou's mansion. He was worried that something had happened to Qin Yining and was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. Now that he saw her return safely, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Yining told Master Zhong what had happened. Master Zhong looked at Pang Shao with a respectful expression. "Young Master Yao, thank you for saving Miss Dong's life. Miss Dong is the savior of my family. You are also Miss Dong's savior, so you are also my savior." Master Zhong smiled politely and turned to Qin Yining. "Miss Dong, don't worry. I will take good care of young Master Yao." "That's good." Qin Yining looked at the sky and sighed. "I should go back. If I go back any later, I'm afraid I'll get into trouble." Pang Shao was actually well aware of Qin Yining's family situation, but it wasn't good to show it. She could only ask seriously, "What's the problem? Do you need my help?" Qin Yining glanced at her and shook her head. "What can I do about the matter of, the sky wants to rain, the mother wants to get married?" She sighed and then became spirited again. "My surname is Qin, 4th in the family. Young master can call me Qin C in the future. I haven't asked how I should address you." A girl's name couldn't be casually told to a man. Qin Yining was willing to introduce himself like this because he wanted to make friends with her. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "This one is called Dida. Didiao." Qin Yining couldn't help but say it out loud. She was stunned. She could tell from this person's smiling eyes that she had been tricked again. She immediately stomped her feet and left. She said angrily, "You are so boring." Pang Xiao was amused and laughed. She covered the wound on her shoulder and said loudly, "Miss, don't be angry. My courtesy name is Xixi. You can call me Yao Xixi." Qin Yining didn't stop walking. She didn't even turn her head, as if she hadn't heard anything. She took the servant girl and got into the carriage and sped away. Pang Xiao stood in place and watched as Qin Yining's carriage gradually drove into the dark streets. Only then did she put away her smile and return to her elegant and cold disguise. "I will have to trouble Master Zhong for the next few days." Chapter 93. In the carriage, Qin Yining's face was still red. Whenever she thought of Yao Xixi's naughty appearance, she was so angry that the roots of her teeth itched. However, there were still some images lingering in her mind. There was the moment when he suddenly put away his cowardice and domineeringly asked her, "Who am I? Why should I tell you?" There was the moment when he quickly walked over and grabbed her hand as if he was trying to catch the arrow that was going to pierce her throat. There was the moment when he stood in front of her and blocked her tall back. There was also the moment when his shoulder was pierced by the arrow. He turned around and smiled at her with his eyebrows raised as he broke the arrow's tail. The more she thought about it, the more fear she felt. Even though this person's mouth was bad and he always liked to tease her, it was true that he didn't care about the past and saved their lives. Otherwise, she, her mother, and her grandmother would all have died at the Immortal Lady Temple. "Bing Tang, is young Master Yao's injury really okay?" Bing Tang said, "Young Master Yao's injury is very serious. Even though the arrow pierced through and didn't injure his muscles and bones, he still lost a lot of blood. There is also that poison that numbs the brain. He will be very weak during this period of time. After he recovers, he will need to rest for a while. However, I can guarantee that his life will be fine." Qin Yining finally relaxed a bit and said, "Let's go back and take a look at the storehouse. I remember that I still have a 70-year-old ginseng. If we can use it, then let's use it. Otherwise, I will always feel bad." Bing Tang smiled and nodded, "Miss, don't worry. I am here. Of course I trust you. However, in my life, I have been saved by wild horses and dogs, but the number of times I have been saved by people can be counted on one hand. My foster mother saved me when I was a baby and raised me until I was 8 years old. Unfortunately, before I could repay her kindness, she passed away." Qin Yining's gaze fell on the swaying tassels next to the carriage window. Her eyes gradually moved away. "When I was 7 years old, my foster mother was seriously ill, and the family's money was all used up. At that time, we were really desperate, and there was no one to turn to. I had already made up my mind to sell myself as a slave, and no matter what, I had to save my foster mother. That day, a beautiful older brother passed by my house and asked for water. He gave me 10 taels of silver and dozens of coins. Although his tone was very bad, I could see his kindness. This is the second person who saved me. I wanted to repay him, but I couldn't find him. And the third one is young Master Yao." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Although the people I met, such as my father and my grandmother, were all kind to me, they were all my family and were different from outsiders. In the past, I didn't have the ability to repay my foster mother and that beautiful older brother. But now, I can repay this young Master Yao. The prerequisite is that I don't let him suffer from any illness, so it can't be considered as repayment. If anything happens to him in the future, I will do my best. Song Lan and Qiu Lu both smiled and nodded. When it came to repaying kindness, Bing Tang and Song Lan also felt the same. Bing Tang said, "Miss is warm-hearted and knows how to repay kindness. You will definitely be rewarded." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I don't want to be rewarded. I only want to have a clear conscience. Later, we will go back to the storeroom to find medicine and prepare some tonics. Bing Tang, you go see young Master Yao tomorrow and bring it to him." "Miss, are you not going tomorrow? I think that young Master Yao really wants to see you." Qin Yining's face heated up when she heard this. She shook her head and said, "There is a difference between men and women. Moreover, there is a new concubine at home. I don't know how the situation is." When she thought of this concubine Chow who was going to be brought into the family today, Qin Yining felt a headache coming on. Her mother would definitely make a fuss again, and she didn't know how it would end. Moreover, Madame Chow's background was quite big. She had the emperor as the matchmaker and the empress as her backing. Although she had never met her, she felt that this person was even more important than the old madam. The carriage returned to Qin Manor. Qin Yining brought Bing Tang, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu quickly to Xi Shao Garden. After entering the courtyard, they walked around the screen wall, passed through the hall, and went down the steps. They saw the large red lanterns hanging in the courtyard as if to welcome the new year, illuminating Xi Shao Garden as bright as day. Bright light came from the windows of the main room, and the shadows of several people were cast on the windows. The light that came through the window frame also cast long shadows on the Sun Clan, Mother Jean, and Kai Ju who were kneeling in the courtyard. Qin Yining quickly walked forward. Before she could get close to the Sun Clan, she heard a burst of cheerful laughter from inside the room. The warmth and liveliness inside the room formed a strong contrast with the Sun Clan's lonely figure kneeling in the courtyard and sobbing. Qin Yining's anger was ignited. "Mother, did the old madam punish you to kneel?" The Sun Clan raised her teary eyes. When she saw Qin Yining, she was like a child who had been wronged and saw her parents. She sobbed, "Sister Yi, you're back. The old madam scolded me, said that I was unvirtuous and jealous, that I couldn't lay eggs, that I wasn't allowed to take in concubines, and that I wasn't willing to receive Madame Chow's tea. I explained, but the old madam didn't listen. Sister Hui also." By the time she finished speaking, the Sun Clan was already sobbing. Qin Yining had long seen through the old madam's snobbishness. She didn't need to ask around to guess what the old madam was thinking. It was nothing more than the collapse of Duke Ding's manor, and there was no need for the Sun Clan to support them. In any case, they couldn't help Qin Huayuan in the imperial court. As for the Chao family, even if they were cursed outside, Grand Preceptor Chao was still the emperor's father-in-law. Even if he had been removed from his official position, he still had many henchmen in the imperial court. His relationships could be said to be intertwined. Qin Huayuan, whose foundation was unstable, couldn't compare to him. But now, Madame Chao had become a concubine bestowed by the emperor to Qin Huayuan. In this world, the most reliable way to bind the relationship between two families was to unite by marriage. In the past, because of the involvement of Prince Ning and Duke Ding's manor, there was hostility between Grand Preceptor Chao and Qin Huayuan. But now, Qin Huayuan had become Grand Preceptor Chao's son-in-law. Not only did Qin Huayuan have a powerful backer, but in Grand Preceptor Chao's eyes, he also had a virtuous son-in-law. The previous matters could be dispelled. In any case, Grand Preceptor Chao's position was given to his son-in-law, and it didn't fall into the hands of an outsider. It was likely that the imperial court had been reshuffled again. From old Madam's point of view, what she was thinking about was reasonable. If she didn't take advantage of Madame Chow's marriage to trample on her and her mother in front of her, how could she show her welcome to Madame Chow? However, this method of doing things was too heartless. But this was the reality. Not to mention that her mother had no one to rely on now. She, as the granddaughter of Duke Ding, would also be implicated. "Mother, don't cry." Qin Yining squatted down and wiped the Sun Clan's tears with his sleeve. He held her in his arms, patted her back as if comforting a child, and whispered in her ear, "Mother, remember that we have no one to rely on. Mother, you have to remember that we don't have anyone to rely on now. We have to rely on ourselves for everything. No matter what old Madam does, what Sister Hui does, or what Father chooses, I'm bound to you. I'm your daughter and will always belong to you. I'll protect you. No matter what, I'll accompany you." The Sun Clan helplessly nodded repeatedly. When Mother Jean and Kai Ju heard Qin Yining's words, their tears once again fell like broken beads. At this moment, Mammy Qin happened to be smiling and talking to Ji Xiang as she lifted the curtain and came out. Chapter 94. Mammy Qin, does old Madam have any orders? Qin Yining saw that it was Mammy Qin who spoke, so she hurriedly stood up. Mammy Qin led Qin Yining to the corridor at the side and whispered, "Fourth young miss, the new concubine is in the room. Old Madam likes her very much. This servant knows that you are a filial girl, but you must know what to do and not be impulsive." The words, "don't be impulsive," contain too many profound meanings. Should she not be impulsive and offend the new concubine? Or should she not be impulsive and offend old Madam? Or should she not be impulsive and bear a grudge against old Madam? Mammy Qin was old Madam's right-hand woman. Her intentions were most likely old Madam's intentions. Old Madam had done such a despicable thing of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Could it be that she still wanted to bully her mother and curry favor with her? Qin Yining's lips curled into a smile, but her eyes gradually turned cold. From the moment old Madam learned that Duke Dinggua's men were beheaded, she locked Sun Shi in the ancestral hall and even shouted that she wanted to divorce her. She had seen through old Madam. The eldest daughter-in-law of the Sun Clan was the family Qin's eldest daughter-in-law. She had been friends with old Madam for at least 30 years. Normal people would have feelings even if they raised cats and dogs for a long time, let alone people. However, old Madam was able to blacken her heart to half a daughter of the Sun Clan. On the other hand, what about her? She and old Madam had only met for less than 2 months. If old Madam was good to her, then 50% was because of her father's love for her, 30% was because her maternal grandfather was Duke Ding, and the remaining 20% was because of her identity as the imperial preceptor's legitimate daughter. An alliance marriage would definitely be of great use. The remaining 10% was because of the grandmother-granddaughter relationship she had gotten along with during this period of time. Now that Duke Ding's mansion had collapsed, she had lost 30% of her reliance. She would never abandon her mother and switch camps for such an illusory happiness while her mother was being bullied. It was only a matter of time before she fell out with old Madam. Now, she could treat it as if the grandmother-granddaughter relationship no longer existed. Then, all that was left for her was her father's love and her identity as the legitimate daughter. As long as her father still liked her, she had a 60% chance of success. She could guarantee that she and her mother would have no worries in the inner courtyard. Qin Yining was a person who became calmer the more difficult problems he encountered. In just a few breaths, he had already sorted out his thoughts. He smiled at Mammy Qin and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Mammy." Mammy Qin looked into Qin Yining's bright eyes. For some reason, she felt a chill in her heart. She was too similar to the young Qin Huayuan. For a moment, Mammy Qin seemed to see the young man, Qin Huayuan, who had once fought with others to protect the old Madam. Mammy Qin laughed dryly and said, "It's nothing. Miss, please come in first." All right. Qin Yining walked side by side with Mammy Qin towards the main room. He asked, Mammy Qin, where is my father right now? Master just went to the outer courtyard study. Father should be very happy to have a new concubine. Mammy Qin could tell that Qin Yining wanted to use her to find out Qin Huayuan's attitude towards this matter. This matter wasn't a secret. Even if she didn't say anything now, Qin Yining would find a way to ask someone else. Mammy Qin wasn't so muddle-headed that she couldn't tell what was important and what was important. She might as well be a good person. She said in a low voice, Master just sat for a short while before leaving. Then, the old madam questioned First Madam. In other words, Qin Huayuan didn't know that the Sun clan was being punished to kneel here. Qin Yining smiled gratefully. Thank you very much. Fourth Miss is too polite. The two stood in the corridor. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then called Bing Tang over and whispered a few words in her ear. Bing Tang immediately nodded and said, Okay, this servant will go right away. Mammy Qin didn't know what Qin Yining had arranged for Bing Tang to do. The young lady ordered the people around her, so she couldn't do anything about it. Thus, she personally lifted the warm curtain and invited Qin Yining into the room. Qin Yining smiled at the Sun clan comfortingly, then ordered Song Lan and Qiu Lu, you two, go get 3 thick warm pads and 2 charcoal basins. The old madam is benevolent. Even if she was angry and punished my mother to kneel, she wouldn't let her kneel on the cold stone floor in the cold wind on a cold night. If my mother really got sick from the cold, the old madam would be distressed. Yes. Song Lan and Qiu Lu immediately went to prepare thick warm pads, charcoal basins, cloaks, hand stoves, and other things. Qin Yining's strict gaze swept over the stunned servants of Ci Shao Garden in the corridor, and she coldly said, You are all the people who serve the old madam. How can you misinterpret the old madam's orders? If this matter is discussed behind closed doors, everyone will know that you servants don't use your brains. If this matter is spread out, wouldn't the old madam's reputation be ruined by you people? Mammy Qin secretly admired Qin Yining's wit and boldness. She was intimidated by her and saluted with the other maidservants. This servant knows her mistake. Qin Yining was satisfied. She gave the Sun clan, who were looking at her with bright eyes full of hope, a reassuring smile, then turned and entered the room. The Sun clan's room had thick pads, and 2 charcoal basins were placed on the left and right of the front. They also wore thick cloaks and held warm hand stoves. Their bodies were warm, and their hearts were at ease. Mother Jean and Kai Ju were so warm that they almost cried. In their hearts, their trust and worship of Qin Yining rose to another level. Qin Yining didn't avoid people when she spoke, so her words were clearly heard by the people in the room. Old Madam's face turned red from her indirect scolding. Qin Yining entered the room and bypassed the screen with a smile on her face. Her beautiful eyes turned, and she clearly saw the people in the room. Old Madam was wearing a rose-purple brocade robe, and she wore a headband of the same color inlaid with rubies. Her appearance was very festive. Sitting next to Old Madam was a young woman wearing a light pink robe and a phoenix hairpin. Her appearance was very bright. She was born with a pink face and peachy cheeks. She had a jade-like nose and cherry lips. The corners of her lips were slightly raised. Even if she wasn't smiling, she seemed to be smiling. Her almond eyes were full of affection, and her pink face was full of spring. She looked like she was in her early 20s and didn't look like she was in her 30s at all. This was the Empress's older sister, Chao Yuqing. Chao Yuqing didn't look very similar to the Empress in terms of appearance, but her body was exactly the same. Even though Qin Yining was also a woman, she couldn't help but want to take a few more glances at her. While she was sizing up Chao Yuqing also didn't avoid sizing her up. Her eyes were full of amazement. This must be fourth young miss. Such a handsome appearance. Fourth young miss is so similar to Laoi when he was young. Chao Yuqing looked like she was in a daze. She shook off Qin Yining, who was holding her arm, and stood up to welcome her. She raised her hand as if she wanted to touch Qin Yining's face, but halfway through, she came back to her senses and pulled her hand back. She took off a pair of mutton fat white jade bracelets from her wrist and presented them to Qin Yining with both hands. Fourth young miss, please don't dislike it. This is a small token of my appreciation. The beauty smiled, revealing her white teeth and bright eyes. It really made people unable to refuse. Seeing Chao Yuqing being so attentive, Qin Yining's eyes were wide open. Old Madam was also very surprised. She was about to reprimand Qin Yining for not knowing the rules and not saluting, but she swallowed her words back down. Qin Yining looked at Chao Shi with a smile and curtsied, "Greetings concubine mother Chao." Concubine mother's good intentions shouldn't be declined. However, since concubine mother is coming today, I should be the one to prepare a gift for concubine mother. I really shouldn't accept concubine mother's gift. She was the daughter and the true master of this fool. Chao Yuqing was only a small concubine mother. Even if she was bestowed by the emperor, she was still only a concubine. Concubines were only a little higher in status than ordinary maidservants. In front of the foreign, she had to call herself servant Xia. What qualifications did a servant have to meet her with the status of an elder? How could she have the face to give her, the daughter, a greeting gift? Qin Yining's words were too harsh. Second foreign and third foreign became nervous. On the side, third foreign, seventh foreign, and eighth foreign all tightly clenched their handkerchiefs. However, Qin Huining sneered and secretly laughed at Qin Yining for acting recklessly. Old Madam was extremely nervous and berated in a deep voice, "Sister Yi. You're impudent. Quickly kneel down and apologize to concubine mother Chao." Kneel. Apologize. Qin Yining looked at Old Madam in astonishment and said with an innocent face, "Grandmother, granddaughter doesn't know what wrong she did. Why should I apologize? Could it be that the rules that grandmother taught granddaughter a few days ago were all false?" Old Madam choked and didn't have time to speak before Qin Yining continued. "Grandmother said that concubines were used for business. In some families, concubines are used to entertain guests. A concubine's status is only a slightly higher level servant. I'm father's daughter. Grandmother wants me, a daughter, to kowtow and apologize to a servant. Are you sure? When did I say this?" Old Madam's face flushed red. She nervously smiled at Chao Yuqing and said, "Yuqing, don't listen to a child's nonsense. Mother absolutely didn't mean to look down on you." Chao Yuqing was stunned. Her beautiful eyes looked at Qin Yining. There were many emotions in her eyes that Qin Yining couldn't understand. Then, she unexpectedly bowed to Qin Yining. "This concubine has overstepped the bounds. This concubine was just too happy to see fourth foreign and momentarily forgot myself. Miss, please don't blame me. Concubine mother Chao doesn't need to be so courteous. From now on, we'll be a family." Qin Yining smiled magnanimously. The room was momentarily quiet. Even the sound of breathing could be heard. Ever since Chao Yuqing married into the family, Old Madam had been flattering her and worshipping her as if she was an ancestor. In order to please her, she even found an excuse to punish the Sun clan by making them kneel. Who would have thought that this savage miss didn't care about anything when she came back and made Chao Yuqing suffer in silence? Chao Yuqing actually meekly and obediently suffered this loss. Second foreign and third foreign also looked down on Old Madam's actions. The Sun clan's current tragic situation made them feel sad for their kind. Now that they saw Qin Yining standing up for the Sun clan like this, they inexplicably felt refreshed in their hearts. Third Furen, Seventh Furen, and Eighth Furen looked at Qin Yining with worship in their eyes. But in the blink of an eye, their eyes were filled with worry. This was Madame Chow Ah. Chapter 95. Old Madame's tobacco pipe was made of brass and was very heavy. In her anger, she used all her strength and threw the tobacco pipe straight at Qin Yining's head. If he was hit, his head would definitely bleed. At the very least, his face would be disfigured. Everyone was so scared that they cried out, "Ayah!" Who would have thought that Qin Yining waved his hand with all his strength and actually changed the direction of the tobacco pipe, causing it to heavily smash on the multi-treasure pavilion. The brass tobacco pipe and pot just happened to smash on a small glazed ornament. The two items fell to the ground together. The glazed ornament shattered, and the tobacco pipe and jasper holder also fell apart. The sound of the shattering resounded through the sky in the silent courtyard, causing everyone's heart to tremble. The most shocking thing was that Qin Yining's eyes were as fierce as a wolf's when she waved her hand. "Grandmother, do you want to smash your granddaughter to death? Or do you want your granddaughter to be disfigured?" Qin Yining had a smile on his face and looked at old Madame with shining eyes. His Majesty has always promoted benevolence, and all the subjects imitated him. Every family submits to others with virtue. If you feel that your granddaughter's words are unreasonable, you can use reason to teach your granddaughter. Why do you want to smash your granddaughter's head with such a heavy thing? If you smash me to death, my father will have no children. I'm afraid that the discussions in the imperial court will not be good. Shut up. Quickly kneel down. Old Madame put on a strong front and slapped the low table. Qin Yining hurriedly patted old Madame's chest to help her breathe. Then, he turned around and angrily rebuked Qin Yining, "You're too impudent. How can you speak to grandmother like that?" Qin Yining looked at her coldly, "Shut up. It's not your turn to criticize me." Qin Yining subconsciously trembled. He was so scared that his face turned deathly pale. His stomach was full of anger and hatred. Under Qin Yining's oppression and intimidation, he couldn't refute. Old Madame repeatedly said, "Rebellion, rebellion, this is a rebellion. Someone come, drag her out for me." Mammy Qin frowned at the side. She expected that the fourth miss was a piece of explosive charcoal. Seeing her biological mother being wronged, how could she let it go? She even dared to humiliate Chow, who had such a big background. She probably wouldn't even put old Madame in Qin Yining's eyes. Mammy Qin helplessly ordered people to drag Qin Yining out. Qin Yining caught a glimpse of the servant's movements out of the corner of her eye. She sneered and said, "You don't have to do it. I will naturally leave after I've finished speaking." Looking straight at old Madame, her eyes seemed to be burning with two clusters of flames. I know what old Madame is thinking. I'm not the only one who knows. Everyone here isn't stupid. But my mother, for this family, even if she didn't make any contributions, she still have hard work. But for this families of my mother, even if she didn't make any contributions. But, of my mother, for this family. Even if she didn't, over. What would second aunt and third aunt think? S's of mothers. You. Grandmother, I advise you to think twice. Don't be too unsightly. Unfilial daughter. Someone come, beat her out for me. Beat her out. Granddaughter spoke rudely today and offended old Madame. Grandmother, please punish me. After saying what needed to be said, Qin Yining lifted her skirt and knelt down. Her back was straight, and her pride didn't diminish at all. Although she was asking for forgiveness, everyone could see that she was asking for forgiveness because of the relationship between grandmother and granddaughter. It wasn't because she was convinced by old Madam. Her appearance, which was full of thorns, made all the women feel that their knowledge had been broadened. They had never seen a woman who was so domineering and hot in the face of bullying. Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Yining from the side. Her eyes were filled with admiration and interest. Old Madam took a deep breath and said loudly, "Someone come, lock the fourth miss in the woodshed. Let her out when she realizes her mistake." The room was silent. Mammy Qin didn't immediately move. She looked at old Madam, wanting to say something but hesitated. Second Madam and third Madam looked at each other and also hesitated to speak up for Qin Yining. When Qin Huining saw that everyone refused to listen to old Madam's orders, she remembered how Mammy Qin treated Qin Yining in a special way. She couldn't help but become angry and said angrily, "What? Mammy Qin doesn't intend to listen to grandmother's orders?" Mammy Qin was stunned. She lowered her eyes and said, "This servant doesn't dare." "Impudent. Do you have the right to speak here?" Old Madam frowned and glared at Qin Huining in displeasure. Qin Huining was reprimanded until her face turned red and she lowered her head. Although old Madam didn't like Qin Yining disobeying her, she still liked Qin Yining's intelligence, courage, and skill. This kind of woman not only had a way of dealing with things, but also had a good face. She had also obtained the crown prince's favor. It couldn't be better to use her for a marriage alliance. She wanted to punish her for the sake of her own face. However, compared to her, old Madam disliked Qin Huining's fence-sitter appearance even more now. To be honest, when old Madam calmed down and thought about the way she treated the Sun clan, she also felt guilty. It was just that the situation was like this, so there was nothing she could do. Qin Yining was willing to do this for the sake of the Sun clan. It inexplicably made old Madam recall how Qin Huayuan protected her when she was young. Qin Yining had only returned to the Fu for less than 2 months. Not only did she not have a deep relationship with the Sun clan, but the Sun clan also didn't treat Qin Yining well. She could still stay by the Sun clan's side without abandoning them. But what about Qin Huining? The Sun clan doted on her like a pearl and a treasure for 14 years. Now that the Sun clan had fallen and a new concubine had entered the Fu, Qin Huining enthusiastically went to the new concubine's side, completely ignoring the kindness of raising her. So many men in Duke Ding's Fu had been beheaded, yet Qin Huining could still wear bright colors to meet people. Although old Madam's own actions were criticized by others, she didn't like to see Qin Huining's fawning face. When Chao Yuqing saw this, she smiled and said, "Old Madam, this concubine will overstep the bounds and say something. Now that the weather is cold and the earth is frozen, if fourth young miss is locked in the woodshed and falls ill due to the cold, wouldn't you be the one to feel distressed? As a family, it's inevitable that tongues will clash with teeth. Old Madam is the head of the family, so please forgive fourth young Mississippi, that's right. Mother, please don't bicker with Sister Yi." Second Foreign also smiled and persuaded. Old Madam felt much better when someone gave her a way out of this embarrassing situation. She coldly glared at Qin Yining. Just as she was about to speak, she heard a maidservant loudly announce from outside, "Eldest master is here." As soon as the maidservant finished speaking, she saw Qin Huayuan quickly walk in wearing a lead gray brocade cloak with a sable collar. His hair was still covered in white frost and was emitting steam. It was obvious that he had just taken a bath and rushed over before his hair was completely dry. Mammy Qin glanced at the door and saw Bing Tang's figure flash by. So fourth young miss had just ordered Bing Tang to call for help. Sure enough, it was a good tactic. As soon as Qin Huayuan entered, he smiled and bowed to old Madam. "Mother. Brother Meng, why did you come without drying your hair? Aren't you afraid of falling ill?" When old Madam saw her beloved son, she seemed to be in pain. She hurriedly called Mammy Qin to bring a towel to help Qin Huayuan dry his hair. Qin Huayuan sat on the chair below old madam. He smiled and thanked Mammy Qin, who was drying his hair. Then, he said to old madam, "Just now, when I was reading 36 strategies in the study, I saw this section about hiding a knife behind a smile. I wanted to discuss it with Sister Yi. As a matter of fact, when I found out that Sister Yi was here with Mother, I couldn't wait and came over." The phrase, hiding a knife behind a smile, had a deep meaning. Different people had different understandings. No matter what other people thought, old madam's face became hot. "Mother, please take into account that Sister Yi has been wandering outside for many years and didn't have good opportunities to cultivate her. She also has suffered so much. Mother, please don't be angry. If you're angry, your son's heart is truly fearful." Qin Huayuan was now the imperial tutor of the crown prince. For him to be so respectful in front of old madam was already giving old madam a way out. It also greatly satisfied old madam's vanity. Old madam sighed and said, forget it. Do as you wish. But there is one thing. You can't let her off lightly. I want to see how you deal with her." "Yes." Qin Huayuan smiled gratefully. He turned around and said to Qin Yining, "So, Father will punish you by copying the 36 strategies 30 times. Come to the study the day after tomorrow for me to check." What kind of punishment was this? Everyone was dumbfounded again. Could it be that Qin Huayuan felt that Qin Yining's method of dealing with old madam wasn't strategic enough? Shouldn't he punish his daughter by copying women's commandments, the classic of filial piety, and so on? Chapter 96. Regardless of what outsiders thought, Qin Yining understood that her father was educating her in front of everyone like how he would educate his son. Not only was he giving her face, but he was also supporting her. He was reminding everyone that no matter how many concubines he had, he, Qin Huayuan, only had one daughter. There were no fools present. Naturally, they understood the deep meaning behind Qin Huayuan's actions. When they looked at Qin Yining, their gazes changed. Even the old madam felt a bit regretful that she had used the brass tobacco pipe to hit Qin Yining out of shame and anger. Fortunately, Qin Yining had dodged. If she had really hit him and caused his head to bleed and his face to be disfigured, how would she explain it to Qin Huayuan? As a mother, the old madam was well aware of her son's difficulties. No matter how outstanding Qin Huayuan was, he didn't have a male heir to inherit his legacy. Qin Yining was so similar to Qin Huayuan. She was also very intelligent and bold in her actions. She didn't seem like a girl from the boudoir and had some of the straightforwardness of a boy. It was no wonder that Qin Huayuan liked her and wanted to raise her as his son. The old madam secretly thought that in the future, even if she had to discipline Qin Yining, she would have to hide it from Qin Huayuan. "Sister Hui." Qin Huayuan's voice sounded again. Qin Yining, who had lowered her head, suddenly looked towards Qin Huayuan. When she met his gaze, she felt her heart suddenly jump. She hurriedly lowered her eyes and bowed, "Father." Qin Huayuan cast a glance at Qin Yining. He didn't like the magenta cloak and the pearls, gold, and jade on her head. Then, he looked at Qin Yining, who had changed into a white cloak and didn't wear any jewelry. Only then did he feel slightly comforted. "Sister Hui, you're dressed up quite beautifully today." Qin Yining nervously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She knew that Qin Huayuan was reprimanding her. She hurriedly explained, "Father, I don't usually dress like this. It's just that concubine Chow came today. For the sake of the family celebration, I naturally had to dress up well so I didn't feel neglected." Qin Huayuan's gaze finally landed on Chow Yuqing. Ever since he came in, this was the first time he looked at her directly. Chow Yuqing smiled gently, and the joy and attachment in her eyes seemed to be about to materialize and entangle him. However, Qin Huayuan looked away and said, "Concubine Chao is from a prestigious family. She's well-educated and reasonable, so why would she care about what you're wearing?" Qin Huaining's face flushed red from the scolding. It was as if blood was about to drip from her face. She lifted her skirt and knelt down with a plop. "Father, please calm down. Daughter was just momentarily distracted. Father, please forgive me." Qin Huayuan said, "Starting tomorrow, you will reflect on your mistakes behind closed doors in Snow Pear Courtyard. Don't come out until you've copied the classic of filial piety 100 times. Think carefully about what you've done." Although Qin Huayuan was only scolding her, he said those words in front of so many people. It really made Qin Huaining feel that her face was about to be slapped swollen. However, her father was the head of the family and had the old madam under control. Even if she had 10 times the courage, she wouldn't dare to disobey him. Qin Huaining could only hang her head in grievance and say, "Yes. Many thanks for father's teachings. You're on your own now." Qin Huayuan smiled and bowed to the old madam. "Mother, your son is still waiting to go read books with Sister Yi. I'll take her away first." The old madam could only nod her head. Qin Huayuan put on his cloak and walked to the door. He said faintly, "Sister Yi, why aren't you following?" Qin Yining respectfully bowed and bid farewell to the old madam, second madam, third madam, and all her sisters. Only then did she quickly follow out. When they reached the corridor, Qin Huayuan looked at the sobbing Sun Clan and Mother Jean and Kai Ju, who were shivering from the cold. He sighed and said, "First Madam's body is weak. She hasn't fully recovered from her previous illness. Why aren't you helping your madam up and preparing a carriage to send her back to Xingning Garden to rest?" After protecting his daughter, he was now protecting his wife. When the old madam heard this from inside the room, she only pursed her lips and didn't stop him. She sent Mammy Qin out to listen to orders. Mammy Qin immediately responded, "Yes." She immediately ordered someone to prepare a carriage. Chao Yuqing also followed Qin Huayuan to the corridor. She saw the Sun Clan's pale face from crying and then looked at Qin Huayuan's imposing figure standing with his hands behind his back. She bit her lower lip thoughtfully. When the Sun Clan raised her head, she saw Chao Yuqing, who was dressed up beautifully. She was so beautiful that she felt ashamed of her own inferiority. The Sun Clan's eyes burst with unprecedented resentment. Their family had already investigated clearly. Dezhou's envoy wanted Sun Yu's brain. The emperor originally had the opportunity to refuse. It was the demon empress who urged the emperor to issue an imperial edict, forcing Sun Yu to die to prove his sincerity. Later, Dezhou sent out official documents, claiming that they wanted the emperor's life. It was also the demon empress who gave the emperor the idea to destroy the Sun Clan to appease Dezhou's anger. That was why the Sun Clan had fallen to this state. The Chao clan was the enemy that destroyed the Sun Clan. However, Qin Huayuan wanted to take the Chao clan's daughter as his concubine. Now, she looked like a middle-aged woman, kneeling in the snow and crying. Concubine Chao was dressed up beautifully and stood beside Qin Huayuan with a smile. How could the Sun Clan not be resentful of the new and old grudges? She wanted nothing more than to swallow the Chao clan's flesh and blood. Seeing the Sun Clan's emotional fluctuations, Mother Jean panicked. She covered the Sun Clan's mouth and called out to Kai Ju, "Quick, help Madam into the carriage." The Sun Clan's tears flowed down Mother Jin's hands. She sobbed and struggled, but she finally lost her strength. She leaned on Mother Jin's shoulder and sobbed. Qin Huayuan looked at the Sun Clan's back. His eyes flashed with helplessness and guilt. He walked down the stairs and said, "Sister Yi, follow me." "Yes." Qin Yining was already dressed. He held a hand warmer and followed Qin Huayuan with Bing Tang, Autumn Dew, and Song Lan. Xiao Yuqing couldn't help but chase after him and called out, "Master." Qin Huayuan stopped in his tracks and said without turning his head, "Concubine Qiao must be tired. Let's settle her down early." He then instructed Mammy Qin, "Arrange for proper servants to serve concubine Qiao. They must not neglect her. Send the best food, clothes, and necessities." Mammy Qin nodded in surprise. Qin Huayuan meant that he wanted to take good care of concubine Qiao, but he didn't want to touch her. That was true. Everyone in the world knew how the Sun family fell. Qin Huayuan and Ding Guogong, his son-in-law, had never quarreled with each other. Just now, he reprimanded Qin Huaining for not wearing mourning clothes and punished her to reflect on her mistakes in seclusion and copy the book of filial piety 100 times. How could he immediately accept concubine Qiao now? If there was a woman who couldn't wait to sleep with her after she was brought in, that wouldn't be the Qin Huayuan she had watched grow up. Mammy Qin admired Qin Huayuan's character very much. She also felt that in some aspects, Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan were surprisingly similar. She couldn't help but smile. Xiao Yuqing stared blankly at Qin Huayuan as he walked away. The expectation in her eyes faded, and she sighed softly. Mammy Qin deeply understood Madame Dowager's meaning. She respectfully and politely asked Xiao Yuqing to sit for a while. Qin Huaining also cheered up. Thinking that she would reflect on her mistakes in seclusion from tomorrow, she smiled and talked to Xiao Yuqing. Like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, everyone clustered around Xiao Yuqing and entered the room again. They chatted happily. Qin Yining followed Qin Huayuan to the study in the outer courtyard. The father and daughter sat on the left and right of the Arhat bed by the window. The maidservant served hot tea. Qin Huayuan waved his hand and sent them away.